everybody in.
Thanks, Kathy.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome. Just having some great music to get us in a good place. Good morning, everyone. We're just going to give a few more minutes for folks to be let in from the waiting room. So we're so happy you've joined us, and we'll get started shortly. All right. Thank you, Kathy. I enjoyed that music too. We are so happy to have everyone with us this morning. I see a lot of folks still, we're getting a pretty constant feed from folks coming into the waiting room and letting them in. So I just want to give us a couple more minutes as we let folks in this morning. We had 60 plus participants throughout the day yesterday, and we're at 38 right now. So we'll give us just, I'll just give us 2 more minutes and then we'll get rolling for the morning. So, but while we do that, Felicia, are you on yet? There's so many different, everyone's renamed. So now, In which case, while we're getting started, if you would please, just like yesterday, and for those who might be just joining us today, would you please rename yourselves in, as you see, in our little boxes, your name is there. And we want to be able to break folks up in different regions. And yesterday, we were in our own regions, but today, I think if I recall right, we're gonna break each other up with different regions, but we don't want all the same regions in the same room. So as you see, my name is gonna be Northern, from the Northern region, and then my name. And if anybody has any questions on how to do that, if you hover your mouse over your picture, there are going to be 3 little dots, white dots, and a little blue box. And if you click on that, you'll have a chance to select rename. And that's how you would do it. And right now on the map, you see that we have kind of the regional map. And really, it can be where you're from or where you live right now. It's really however. I actually could. Yesterday I was Northern. I could change today to Anchorage / Matsu. But I'm a Northern girl at heart, so I'm gonna stick with my Northern. All right, well, let's kick us off. I think we're at 43 people this morning, and it is so nice to see everyone back. Thank you so much for coming back to us today, or if you're just joining today, we're so happy to have you. I think what I will do, Uvla Lotak, and I put that in the chat, but it is there. Uvla Lotak means good morning, and that's in our North Slope dialect, and it's in the chat bar if you want to see how it's spelled. But Pakalarifsi, which means welcome. Uvanga Nagayak, Taniktun Sinaga, Dr. Pearl Kayan Brower. Biakaving mi uronga, Savaktunga Nuna Dinainamon, Savaktunga University of Alaska me, Senior Advisor, Alaska Native Success, Institutional Diversity, Student Engagement Lu. So good morning, everyone. I just introduced myself in my native language, which is the North Slope dialect of Alaska. And actually more particularly, specifically the dialect of Barrow, because even on the North Slope, we have about 3 different dialects. My Inupiaq name is Nagayak, but I more commonly, everybody knows me, you all know me by Pearl. So I'm from Barrow originally, and but I live and work, I live and work on the lands of the Dena'ina, and we're gonna do a quick land acknowledgement in a minute. But I do currently, my day job, I work for the University of Alaska, and I'm at the system office in the president's cabinet as a senior advisor for Alaska Native Success, Institutional Diversity, and Student Engagement. A nice long title, but it really coordinates well with what we do here at AlaskaCAN. So, and I'm just so happy to be here. I want to do a quick land acknowledgement, and it's really important, I think, that we remember why we're here. We remember whose land we're on, or who has stewarded the lands that we are on. And something really important for me is that while I'm here in Anchorage and work on these lands, my heart, I'm from Barrow, my heart and soul kind of resides in the land there. So as you think about where you are today, feel free to put it in the chat. But my land acknowledgement is that I acknowledge that I reside and work upon the ancestral lands of the Dena'ina people. Their stewardship of this land over thousands of years allows me to call this place home. I acknowledge the rich cultural heritage of all of our Alaska Native peoples across this great land we call Alaska. And while my feet stand on the traditional lands of the Dena'ina, my heart and mind give gratitude to all of our Alaska Native peoples upon whose lands all of us get to work and give back to every day. So please feel free to think about your land acknowledgement and chat it in the chat bar where you're connecting with us this morning. So we had an incredible day yesterday, and I just want to make sure that everyone knows if you have any questions, if you have any tech difficulties, please touch base with Kathy LeCompte, who's our facilitator via the chat. We are all watching that pretty closely, but Kathy is watching it very closely. So if you have any questions at all, connect with Kathy. And then I just want to give a bit of a reflection on yesterday for those who maybe weren't able to join us, but also I think we had a great day yesterday. Oh my goodness. But we did have a couple questions. So we kind of opened our space with Mandy Savitz-Romer, who I just heard so many things from people about takeaways, and we'll make sure that her presentation is on our website so folks can actually access it. We then had a quick membership meeting where we just really encouraged everyone to get us involved in what we're doing at AlaskaCAN. And then we had President Pat Pitney. And because we were kicking off Women's History Month, I think it's Women's History Month. I just want to note that President Pitney was officially, the board officially brought her in as president versus interim president. She's the first woman president of the University of Alaska in about 100 years. So really exciting, I mean, progress, right? Progress is so important. So President Pitney spent some time with us. We had Janelle Vanass talk to us a little bit about how are we bridging, what is life after high school and how are we bridging? And then we went into regional breakouts where we talked about how we could get our regions across the state connected to AlaskaCAN and involved into the future. And I want to, and then we kind of closed out. We had a sponsor moment from Alaska 529 and we closed the day. But I wanted to take a couple of minutes to talk about what the regional breakout groups were, because just like all, we're not perfect, and we felt we left it not quite setting the stage for what exactly the regional breakouts were about. And I'm just going to give one final call. Felicia, are you? I can't see. Has anyone seen Felicia join us this morning?
She's here.
Felicia, are you here?
I am here.
Oh, there you are, Felicia. I'm going to call you out just a little bit. Because one of the things is that the Southeast has had actually a very robust regional breakout group, and one that's been very engaged with what we're doing. And Felicia Swanson, who is one of our very own board members, has been really integral in that group. And would you, and you've kind of been a part of it from the beginning. So in just a minute or two, would you mind just telling us a little bit about kind of the history of the regional breakouts and why that was?
Well, as a state, Alaska has so many different needs based in different areas. In Southeast, we have a lot of varying Indigenous communities that want to be involved. And so we've sort of morphed it into, with the help of Emily Ferry of Alaska School Boards Association, into a STEPS grant and a AlaskaCAN, because we're trying to move forward, making students more successful with the Southeast lens and connecting people that can help. Because like I said, as a state, we're so vast that it's helpful to look at it with a smaller lens, with smaller connections, to then connect it back and talk about it as a state. And I'm going to ask Janelle if I missed any key points.
No, no, and I think I can share that I learned a lot from coming down to Southeast and seeing this functional regional group meet. And so what I can share is that I really encourage the other groups to see the power of meeting regionally, and so that the work that AlaskaCAN is doing statewide, when you have those conversations at a regional level, you can really get down to some ideas that can move forward quickly. So just want to encourage that I walked into Southeast going, oh, what's this? Another group I'm meeting with? And it's turned out to be just a really very powerful and action oriented group. So I encourage the other regions to do it.
Thank you, Felicia and Janelle. So really appreciate that, kind of setting the stage for what the regional breakout groups could do and could be. But of course, they really can be whatever regions would like them to be. But on our end, we just would love for more engagement from each of the regions and what we're doing at AlaskaCAN. So I think what I would probably say with this, since we're not redoing that, that breakout group, but it's just that think about who maybe in your region would be really great at facilitating and convening and bringing everyone together, and start working towards these conversations with folks in your region, and know that AlaskaCAN is here to help support and assist and really wants to engage in whatever way that is meaningful to you. So I think more to come. And if you are interested in being that regional kind of point person, let us know, because then we will help make sure that things are happening. So thank you so much for and the time everyone spent in those regional groups yesterday. We're kind of closing up. I want to go into a quick review of our agenda for today. We are together until noon. I believe we have a slide. It was noted that we had a couple of updates to the agenda, and those could be found on our website, 65 by 2025. But just a quick note, we're going to hear from Dwayne Mays. We're going to have a chance to engage with Dwayne. We are going to go into a sponsor moment. We're going to hear from Ilisagat College, and then we're going to have a panel. Today is our accessibility day, and we're going to have approaches to accessibility in Alaska. And Shelley Morgan and Mark Roseberry are going to facilitate that panel. And then ACPE, Alaska Commission on Post-Secondary Ed, is going to talk to us for a few minutes on their sponsor moment. And then we're going to have our session on the board nomination introduction. So those individuals who are running for board this year are going to get a chance to introduce themselves for a couple of minutes. And then we'll close out and we'll adjourn. So that's our day. And again, if you have any questions, make sure that you note them in the chat. And I want to take one more minute to do a big shout out. I don't know who all saw the release. We know that Alaska Pacific University has been looking for a president for quite some time. And I want to, we all, at least on behalf of AlaskaCAN, but our whole membership, congratulate Janelle Vanass, who our very own Janelle Vanass, who was just announced yesterday. She will be the next president of Alaska Pacific, and we are so excited for her. She has spent many, many years in rural Alaska, really connects with knows rural Alaska, knows our Alaska Native, many of our Alaska Native communities, and has worked with Alaska Native students for many years. So as they continue their journey to hopefully become a tribal university in the future, we are really excited. So congratulations, Janelle. So pleased.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Janelle, do you want the floor or should we?
Nope. No. Just wanted to say thanks.
You're welcome. We're really excited. And we know AlaskaCAN, we know we'll be engaged with AlaskaCAN. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shelley to introduce our keynote for the morning. So happy to have everyone with us, and Shelley, take it away.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I have the pleasure of introducing our next keynote speaker, Dwayne Mays. Dwayne is the director for the Alaska Department of Labor and Workforce Development's Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. I had a pleasure of hearing him speak a few years back, and if you have not yet heard him, he is an incredible speaker, very inspiring with really moving story to tell. So I'm really excited to be able to introduce him today. Dwayne has a bachelor's and master's degree in vocational rehabilitation from the University of Wisconsin-Stout. He has spent 38 years working in the field of voc rehab, 8 in the private sector and 4 as a business owner. He's worked 3 years as the operations director with the Governor's Council on Disabilities and Special Education. He spent 8 years as the division director for senior and disability services with the Alaska Department of Health and Social Services. And 2 years ago, Dwayne decided to come back to the Alaska Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, where he feels he truly belongs, and is quoted saying, assisting Alaskans with disabilities in obtaining competitive and integrated employment is his passion. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to our keynote speaker today, Dwayne Mays.
Great. Well, thank you for that. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint. Let me go to, all right, almost there. Okay, so thank you for that introduction. I have actually been in Alaska for 40 years, and I will tell you that I am thrilled and excited to be back with the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. And I believe that this presentation will, when you get through this, you will know why I wanted to come back to the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. So I used this presentation, I was talking with Director Comp, and I used this with the university. The university I graduated from is in University of Wisconsin-Stout in northern Wisconsin. And they asked me to come and do a presentation because I actually graduated from that college, and my brother graduated from that college in the same degree. My sister graduated from that college. All three of us have bachelor's and master's degree from that university. So I did this presentation, had a conversation with Director LeComp, and we both felt that this would be very relevant for AlaskaCAN. So I will do my best not to run past the 45 minutes that have been delegated for this presentation. So the past, the present, and the future. So really for me, it starts with my mom and dad. And some might be thinking, okay, all right, we've heard this before. My mom and dad played a very critical role for both my brother, sister, and I in terms of the work that we do today. They were impeccable parents, my mom and dad. So you will see that I was born in Nebraska in 1956, and both my parents, my mom and dad, are deaf. They communicate through American Sign Language. My mother, Betty Arlene Mays, was actually mainstreamed in northern Wisconsin, and it was a small country school, and she would often tell me the story about her frustrations of not having any kind of accommodations. No sign language interpreter, no note taker, etc. So she actually left in the 6th grade, had a conversation with her mom and dad, and said, this isn't working for me. So she ended up supporting her parents, my grandparents, on the farm. That's what she did. So she felt very isolated living in this environment, getting up early in the morning to work the fields and so forth. So she was a farm girl through and through. Her parents, both hearing, did not ever take the time to learn American Sign Language. So she often would share with me just the struggles of having in-depth conversation with her mom and dad, my grandparents. My grandparents, by the way, were great. You know, you have to always remember that that was then, this is now. My father, Gerald Winston Mays, actually attended the Omaha School for the Deaf in Omaha, Nebraska. So when he shared his stories with me, they were so powerful because he walked with confidence. He attended classes through the School for the Deaf where the teachers were either deaf or hearing, but fluent in American Sign Language. He had access to anything and everything on that campus. He played football. He played basketball. He was a track star. He attended different kinds of clubs on campus. So if you would have a conversation with my father and then a conversation with my mother, you could see literally the difference in terms of that confidence. My mother being very shy, my father being very outgoing and very confident. He also had parents, farmers, that never took the time to learn American Sign Language. 90+% of people, adults, moms and dads throughout the country that give birth to a deaf child will never take the time to learn American Sign Language. So think about that. So you're raising a child that's deaf, and you don't know how to communicate effectively with that child. So that can be very challenging. So my grandmother on my father's side often would tell me she regretted never taking the time to learn American Sign Language. Not only did she give birth to my father as a deaf man, but she also gave birth to my aunt, her daughter, Aunt Thelma, that was also deaf. So the two of them, my dad and my aunt, attended the Omaha State School for the Deaf. If you were to meet my aunt, you would see the same thing in terms of confidence. She walked with confidence. So in this picture, there's me in the middle. I'm 3 years old. As you can see, there's a birthday cake. And why am I showing you this picture? Right after this event, we had a birthday celebration. To my left, your right, is my sister Bonnie. At the time, she's 2 years old. To my left here, in the picture, is my brother, actually 7 years old. So we celebrated my birthday in Nebraska at my uncle's house, and then we left. And we moved to Davenport, Iowa. My father made a decision that, we were living, we were struggling to survive, and he was doing odd jobs. And so he signed up for and was accepted to this trade school in Davenport, Iowa, to become certified as a press machine operator. So those big, massive press machines that you've seen in newspaper organizations, he did that. And in the beginning, I thought, well, why is he doing that? Why did he decide out of the blue that was the case? Well, many deaf men were trained to run the press machine because it's very noisy. So the logic at that time was, well, they're deaf, they're not going to lose their hearing. Because if you were hearing and ran one of those machines year after year, you would eventually have some type of hearing loss. So my father attended this school for 6 weeks and became certified as a press machine operator. So from there, dirt poor, living day to day, he accepts a job through the trade school, and we moved to Wautoma, Wisconsin, and he begins employment with the local newspaper as a press machine operator. And he was in that position for 1 year. And then he left. And I remember as I started to become a little bit more savvy about the world, I asked him, why did you leave after 1 year? And he said, because they didn't really respect me. They looked at me and saw disability. They didn't see me as a person, as an individual. They saw me as a deaf person. So I was treated that way, and I did not want to work in that kind of environment. So he applies for a job in New Holstein, Wisconsin, and that's where I was raised. And he actually worked as a press machine operator for the local newspaper for 8 years. My mother also was hired by the newspaper, and she worked as a bundler, a newspaper bundler. Hard work, but they both worked for this local newspaper. And she did that for quite some time and then eventually left. My mom leaves the newspaper and attains employment at a local pots and pans factory and worked in that position for 35 years, assembling handles onto pots and pans on an assembly line. And was a proud employee of that pots and pans factory. She loved the work. Now, if you and I got onto assembly line and then we do our 8 hours and we leave full of grit and full of grease, that was my mom. She came home every day, covered from top to bottom, covered in grease and grit from the position. Fortunately, she developed COPD because of the lack of quality of air within the factory, no OSHA standards in place and so forth. So when she died, a part of her death had to do with that COPD diagnosis. So my father worked for this newspaper for 8 years. And I remember the day as though it was yesterday. He comes home and he's in tears. And I was a young kid, I think I was 12 or 13 years old. And I asked my father, why are you crying? I've never seen him cry before. And he says, I quit my job. And I said, well, why did you quit your job? And he said, because I was hired at the same time, whereby they had this other individual that's hearing hired as a press machine operator. And that individual continued to receive raises every year. So as he learned the trade and really became comfortable with it, it's almost like an apprenticeship model, earn as you learn. So my dad never got a raise in 8 years. And he goes back into a meet with the leadership of the newspaper organization and asked for a raise, and they just said no. And he, being a proud deaf man, just said, I'm done. I've had it, and left. And so when he came home, that's what I saw. And that's what I experienced. I could see that he was frustrated. I said to him, Dad, you're going to be able to find another job. Don't worry about it. You know, being pretty raw and pretty naive. And I remember to the word he signed to me, and he said, you don't understand, son. I'm deaf. So my father was out of work for about a year. And during that time period, he applied for many jobs. My brother and I and my sister did everything we could. You know, we didn't really know about vocational rehabilitation at the time. So we did everything we could to really help out my dad. And we would go into job interviews. I did a ton of those job interviews and interpreted for my dad. They didn't provide interpreters. So he would drag me into those interviews. And that's where I had to grow up fast. I could see the look on the person that's doing the interview that we're going to hire this guy. He's deaf. He doesn't talk. He communicates through American Sign Language. We don't know the language. And so whenever we would get up, my brother and I would often talk about this, get up from the interview. Sometimes we would look back and we would see the employer take that application, rip it up, and throw it into the garbage can. There was absolutely no way they were going to hire him. So for my brother, my sister, and I, it's crystal clear that my parents had to deal with extreme discrimination back at that time. So the pressure and the frustrations, and I often tell this story, I call it the phone call. My brother and sister and I are feeling like we have this responsibility to help my dad. And so I'm thinking, my mom works for this factory, and I know that they have said that they really like her. So I called the factory and was able to navigate my way to the person that would be doing the hiring, the HR director, and had a conversation with him. And I said, my dad is out of work. And he says, well, your mom is fantastic. You know, she is the best employee that we have in this factory of 200 employees. And I said, well, I think there's a lot of commonality between the two of them. So why don't you give my dad a shot? He said, you tell him to come down to the factory. So I get off that phone call and I talked to my dad, and I said to him, you need to go down to the factory and apply. Your wife, my mother, is working there. I think maybe that's going to be a plus. And he said, I had already applied about 6 months ago. And, you know, I'm a young kid. And I said to him, I think you need to apply and do that ongoing, like every 3 months, Dad. So that day he said, I'll go down there. And he did, applied for the position, and was offered the job on the spot. And so my dad worked as the buffer for that factory for 30 years. My parents have since passed on, but I have never told my father that I made that phone call. My parents were very proud of being independent. They worked hard. They were raising 3 hearing kids. I just felt like I could not tell him that, because then he would feel that dependency on us. So never heard that story. You know it. He doesn't, and he has since passed on. So my parents worked together. They were both treated really well. Remember, that was then, and this is now. So, I mean, today, there are probably some things at that factory which closed down. If they were still in existence, they would struggle because there are certain things that they would do that would be considered discriminatory. The one thing that I learned from this is that it's really not what you know, it's who you know. So establishing that relationship with that gentleman, thinking about my mother and her connection, and then trying to pitch my father for that position. So it's not what you know, it's who you know. So I created that relationship with that hiring manager and continued to have conversation up to the time my parents retired from the factory. So this is my mom. This is her last day of employment at the factory. 35 years. I get a phone call from her. It's a telecommunications device for the deaf. And she types about at the time, 2 to 3 words a minute. So she's telling me, using both of her index fingers, that she's retiring. And so I'm able to get from her, because she has limited English, when that day is going to be. I get off the phone with her and I called that gentleman that I called in the very beginning, and I have a conversation with him. He says, yes, we're going to have a retirement party for your mom at the plant. It's on this day. And I asked him if he was going to provide an ASL interpreter. And he said, well, why would we do that? Your mom understands us clearly. She's been here for 35 years, Dwayne. She understands us clearly. So rather than arguing with this employer who really made a difference for us and made a difference for my dad and for my mom and really embraced them, I said, well, thank you very much. And then I booked a flight, living in Alaska, flew to Wisconsin, went to the factory. The parents didn't know, showed up to surprise my mother that on your last day of employment, you will finally have a sign language interpreter. So people were shocked. The employer was shocked. My mom was like, what are you doing? Why are you here? I am here to be your sign language interpreter. So as people got up and went to the front of the room to speak about my mother and how kind she is, I signed that so my mom could understand it. And so then they asked her to come to the front of the room. My mother, being very shy, didn't grow up in a deaf school, I'm thinking there's no way she's going to do that. And she said, no, absolutely. I would love to. Walks to the front of the room. I walk with her. And she starts to sign. And I was honored to be able to voice for her. And so what she said is, thank you all for being so kind to me for the last 35 years. And I appreciate the fact that my son is here, because quite frankly, I have not understood anything that you have said to me for the last 35 years. And so I just smile because I so appreciate, I can see that you care. And I'll never forget this. And I look into the room as I'm voicing for my mother, and about a third of the people in the room started crying. They realized that they assumed that they were on that they were effectively communicating with my mom, and then realized at that moment that that was not the case. So this piece I often share with in my presentations. I call it the speech. And my mother, who in all of her life would never have done that in any other situation. She did it there and did it with confidence and wanted to let him know, I love you, thank you, but you need to know I have not understood a word you said in the last 35 years. So my father retired. She retired because my father was actually in a pedestrian accident. So my dad, being very deaf, communicates through American Sign Language. There were 2 deaf people over a course of 1 year that had passed away. And in the deaf community, it's very cultural. They will come together to honor whoever, that has passed away. So they gathered at a funeral home to honor the individual that had passed away. And in the deaf community, they often will take full advantage of coming together because they know they go back to the hearing world. And so they were on the lawn of the funeral home having dialogue in American Sign Language, an hour, 2 hours. And as my dad was walking across the street to his car, he was hit by a vehicle. So you can see in this picture, broken legs, broken shoulder, concussion, and so forth. Not only did it happen once, it happened twice. The exact same scenario. Another deaf person passed away. Go to that funeral. They all gather in the front lawn. They have conversation in American Sign Language. They don't want to leave because they just love the fact that they have full access to communication. Walks across the street, gets hit again by a car. So I put in this sentence here in bold print, it's not what you know, but who you know. We talked about that before. My first job out of high school is I worked in a nursing home as a nursing assistant. And so I called the nursing home to see if I could get my dad into that nursing home. And they agreed to do that because they knew me and the work I did for the nursing home. And so my dad was ready to leave the hospital. There was no way that my mother could take care of him. So we put him into that nursing home. And he was there for about 6 months. And then I have here the statement, the awakening. My dad actually was kind of in a mental coma. And then one day, 6 months later, in the nursing home, he wakes up. Who am I? Why am I here? What happened to me? So I got a call from the nursing supervisor who I knew really well. She said, Dwayne, you need to come back and have a conversation with your dad because he's panicking. He doesn't know what had happened to him. So I went back and I spent several hours walking through what happened from the date of the accident up to that point in time. So I worked with the Medicare system, and we were able to get my parents' home modified so that my father could live at home. We modified his vehicle so that he would be able to drive his car. So did all those things. All of that comes from my experience working in the field of vocational rehabilitation. So they were very lucky, whether it be me or my brother or sister, we could do that. So what did I learn from my mom and dad? Work ethic. I would say that it's a good thing. Sometimes I work too hard and I pay for it, catching a cold or I'm mentally exhausted, but can't help myself. It's my parents. It's, I have their DNA. So work ethic. My mom, who could barely read and write, would always talk to me, if not by the day, the importance of honesty. And that was the word she used, the sign that she used for me. So I use the word integrity, be impeccable to your word. And if you're consistent in everything that you do with your word, people are going to see that. They're going to know that this is a genuine person. My parents were genuine. The respect that they had from the community, a small little town of 3,000 people. I often heard from the neighbors, people on the street, your parents are unbelievable. Unbelievable. Now, they didn't talk to them because they didn't know American Sign Language. Some were terrified to even attempt to try to communicate with them through pen and paper. There were others that would. But my parents, to this day, if I were to go back and people would bring up your mom and dad were highly regarded in this community. My parents would go to work sick. They were terrified that if they missed work, they would be fired. And so that gentleman that I called to help my father get that job calls me and says, you need to talk to your mom and dad because they're coming to work sick. So my sister and I talked to my mother and we sit her down on the living room couch and we start the dialogue and she starts to freak out like, you got a call from HR. And so I lay it all out for her that they want you to stay home if you're sick. This is a memory that I'll never forget. She said, absolutely not. My responsibility is to this family and I'm going to work. So my parents, for all those years, went to work sick. They were terrified that if something happened and they were sick, they would be fired. And that's what I told the HR guy. And he says, well, that's not going to happen. I says, I can't change my parents' mind. So they helped me to really understand disability and absolute insight and awareness at a young age. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here today. But, you know, I was a pretty decent young teenager in high school. And a lot of that had to do with how my parents trained me, how they educated me on who I should be. We attended a lot of deaf clubs back in the day, and I learned a lot about advocacy. My parents were great advocates for the deaf community in the state of Wisconsin. So in the first grade, obviously because I grew up in a deaf household, my English abilities were very limited. I didn't have a very robust level of words in English at the time. And so the instructor thought that maybe I had a cognitive disability, that there was some type of developmental delay. So they made the recommendation that I would need to be tested. And so I remember that because my mom obviously did not agree, but she attends the assessment, the psychological assessment, has to wait in the hallway. And I go through 3 to 4 hours of testing. And fortunately, the individual that did the assessment understood and could put 2 and 2 together and realized that I lived in a very quiet environment. And so his recommendation was that I needed to really take the time to be scheduled for speech training. So I saw a speech therapist for literally 2 years to really develop my speaking skills. My primary language is ASL. You know, and sometimes if I feel like I really need to get my point across, I want to go to my hands to be able to do that. But the people in front of me are hearing, so I have to do it verbally. So speech therapy played a critical role. As I evolved, my father had polio, and so he was also physically disabled. So my mom was my outdoor buddy. We played basketball together, you know, and she loved it. She was a tomboy, and I would knock her over in a game of 1-on-1. You know, when I pitched for the high school, I was a pitcher. I would throw the ball as hard as I could, and she would catch it. I could tell that she was in pain, but she never complained. I go up to the football field, and I played football in high school, and I would say, run a route, go 10 yards down the field, take a left, and I'm going to throw you the ball. And then I would run after her and tackle her and drive her into the ground. She would never complain. My mom was really, she made a difference for me in terms of helping me to develop my confidence and to use sports as a way to do that. So the last bullet in this slide, there was a special education teacher that lived across the road. And as we were outside, I got to know her over time. And this is her daughter. And that's me. I'm 16 years old. So this is back in the 70s, long hair. And I was at a summer camp as a camp counselor. And she fell in love with me and I fell in love with her. I could not get enough of spending time with her. She was great. So in high school, I was very thankful for the upbringing and having a special education teacher across the street who actually taught in high school. So my mom teaching me a sense of confidence. You'll see a picture of me there shooting a free throw. I was the tallest dude in the high school. And I loved basketball. So basketball was my thing. And, the special needs students in the school would attend the events and just say, we're here because Dwayne is playing. So I felt an obligation to be my best because of those students with special needs that would come to the sporting events. In this picture here, I volunteered every waking moment, every hour that I could, after school, before school, study hall, in the special needs class, working side by side with that special education teacher that lived across the street, working with these students. One of my best friends in high school, Terry Schmitz, with a significant developmental disability, he would go everywhere with me. And he would tell me that often they would be picked on by other students within the educational system. So I would go down to the special needs class and I said, just walk with me. I'll get you to the cafeteria. I'll get you to wherever, and nobody's going to bother you. Be certain of that. And you might be thinking, oh, so you've gotten in a couple of fist fights. I didn't, but I'm pretty firm. And I use the sternness of my voice that if you ever hurt any of these special need kids, you will have me to attend to. I think that they were terrified after they heard me speak, as I spoke with conviction. Do not hurt any one of these students, because then you will have me to attend to. So we created in high school the Youth Association for Retarded Citizens, and I was the board president. We had multiple events for students with special needs after the day of classes, evening events, summer camps, and so forth. We did a lot to really integrate these special needs kids into the community. And this was in 1970. So we still talk about it to this day in terms of integration. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but these are the jobs that I had prior to graduating from high school. And my parents pushed me, said, you have to work. So I did all of this. The last job I had just right out of high school was picking oranges in Florida. Not the best kind of job to have when you're only getting 50 cents a bushel. So 40 bushels a day for 20 bucks back in the 70s. That was the moment when I realized I got to do something else. Picking oranges is not going to get me far. So I come back, this was in Florida. I come back to Wisconsin, and it was my brother who told me about the University of Wisconsin Stout. He said, you need to, I'm doing this. Let me tell you about it, vocational rehabilitation. And as he talked about it, I thought, wow, I would love to have that opportunity to be a rehabilitation counselor, to work with people with disabilities. Been doing it since day one. So it was definitely a game changer for me. It gave me a sense of purpose. It's a part of my DNA. I fell in love with that university. It really made a difference for me. So when I graduated with my bachelor's and master's degree, I had a professor by the name of John C., who encouraged me to follow a lead that he identified in Alaska. I had a couple of friends living in Alaska, and I said, I'd really like to move to Alaska. And he says, well, you may be in luck. And so he set up a phone call between myself and Roger Weed of Collins, Weed and Associates. It's a private rehabilitation company. And so I went to Alaska for the first time at the age of 26, 40 years ago. Had the interview with Roger Weed, not once, but twice. And he told me when I called back, I said, "What's your decision?" He said, "You need to have experience, Dwayne. I got to have somebody with experience." Put on my one and only polyester suit, 3 inches too high from the bottom up in terms of my pants. Walked into Collins, Weed and Associates at 8 a.m. in the morning. Told the secretary that I'm there to see Roger Weed. She goes and talks to Roger, comes back and says, "He says that he's not going to see you." I said, "That's fine. I'll just sit here." So 8 o'clock, 9, 10, 11, 12 o'clock, he leaves to go get a bite to eat. He's shaking his head, comes back in after his bite to eat, shaking his head. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. And it's about 4 o'clock and he buzzes his secretary. He says, "Tell Dwayne to come back. I'll give him about 15 minutes of my time." So I went back and I told him, I said, "I can guarantee you that there will be nobody like me. You know, I am dedicated. I bring an intense compassion to the work that I do. I guarantee that within 1 year, when we look at the numbers, that I will be your best employee." And I remember him pausing for a good 30 seconds. And he said, "Okay, the job is yours." So that story, I often would tell clients that I served as a counselor. How bad do you want it? Are you willing to sit for 8 hours or 24 hours or 30 hours or 40 hours? How bad do you want it? So I did that for about 4 years, and I started my own company and did that for a while and did well as a self-employed private rehabilitation specialist. And it may sound weird to some of you, but in my heart, I knew that I belonged at the State of Alaska Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. And you will see the different positions that I had with the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. So my education, you know, I taught at the university for 24 years, beginning in advanced classes in American Sign Language. You heard from the introduction that I worked for the Governor's Council on Disabilities and Special Education, did that for 3 years as their operations director, learned advocacy, and they are a fantastic council when it comes to advocacy for Alaskans that are developmentally delayed. They had done a great job in terms of priorities for the state of Alaska. I worked for the Division of Senior Disability Services for 8 years as their director. On day one, when I showed up there, I thought I made the biggest mistake in my life. I realized after about 6 months in that it's the reason why I was there. I, along with many other people, attempted to resolve the crisis over at the Alaska Psychiatric Institute. There was a change of leadership from the former governor to the current governor. And I just made a decision that if I stayed at the Alaska Psychiatric Institute, I probably would end up becoming a patient. So I made a decision to go back to the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. Much of the life lessons that I've learned through this journey, number one is relationships. There are people that say, well, that doesn't make any sense. It absolutely does. When you have that relationship, you can have those hard conversations. Communication is ongoing. Stay connected to your community partners and employers. I was relentless in making sure that we did that as a division. Our partners are important. Our employers are important. And I often will tell staff, it's very appropriate. You'll know when to tell your story. I'm telling you my story right now, and it's really quite an honor because there's a virtual room of all these leaders. And for me, you're hearing it and it's real for me. Tell your story. and they will remember that. Listen and be willing to change. My mom taught me that. Said you need to be open to what the person is saying to you and be willing to change your position. And trust me, when staff come to me and they tell me, they make a recommendation, if it makes sense, I will change direction and I will recognize them for that idea. Follow through as much as you can. You know, if it's all talk and no action, people will eventually understand that you're not an outcome-based type of leader. Give 100% every day. I'm not going to tell you that I don't take things personally, but from time to time I do. I work very hard not to personalize difficult conversations, accusation that might be made. I try to stay cool, calm, and collected. I believe that a lot of our leaders today will never expose themselves in terms of not knowing what the issue might be or not knowing enough about a particular issue. So to know what you do not know is the first sign of wisdom. Know your job inside and out and stay current. Know your mission and vision inside and out. I talk about it all the time with our division staff. It's okay to show empathy, but be a true advocate. I'm a very heartfelt leader. And I had someone tell me, you need to change that up, Dwayne. You need to lead from the neck up. And I remember telling that commissioner, if that's what your expectation is, I'm not interested in being a director. The best kind of director is one that leads with their heart. Then I list a couple things, more what you can do to be connected to your community, statewide boards, volunteer, make sure that your policies if you are leading a division or you have some say in development of policy, policies need to be updated and modernized on an annual basis. Be approachable, stay connected nationally. And for us, I am very present and very engaged with our National Trade Association. Be respectful in everything that you do. So the work that we have done to date, the state is a model employer when it comes to hiring people with disabilities under the provisional hire component. We are an employment first state. That bill was passed through the Governor's Council on Disabilities on special education. And I put here, take care of yourself, because when you lead, it's not easy being a leader. I've been in high level executive work now for 15 years. Take a look at me. I don't have any brown hair left. I still have hair. But I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that I still, from day one to now, I still have the drive. But it takes a lot to be at the top, to lead. So take care of yourself in everything that you do. So more stuff that I put out in terms of market and promote, I speak to our VR program as a household name. I've had some staff talk about us as being a best kept secret. Don't care for that. Elevate the two customer approach. Our employers play a critical role in employing Alaskans with disabilities. We as a division are a planning agency, so make sure that people understand that we're not a job center, because we want to really understand the individual with a disability, get them trained up appropriately so that they have something that will be permanent for them going forward. Elevate and advance all types of pre-employment activities. We are doing a lot with our youth so that when they graduate from high school, they really do understand the value of work. They have somewhat of an idea as to what they want to do. The telework model has worked really well for us as a division and for people with disabilities. We're going to continue to advance that in this virtual world. Make sure that your staff are well trained and credentialed, not to mention the consumers that we work with. Give them the credential that they need so that they can compete in the employment market. Make sure you have an accountable program so that you can measure whether or not you're getting the job done. Make sure your staff are engaged with the community. Assistive technology plays a huge role for Alaskans with disabilities. And then I created this national network, and you probably will know why, Deaf Professional Network, so that we can all work together, all 50 states, to make sure that we are applying best practices going forward. So this is my staff. You'll see me to the left. To my right is Mariah Kruger, who's our chief. It's personal for her. She has her master's degree in CRC. The upper picture between my younger picture of me and my older picture of me is Jim Swanson from Southeast, an exceptional leader, manager for DVR in Southeast. The three ladies, starting from the right, Kate Duder here in Anchorage, Gina Bastine here in Anchorage, and Pam Kellish up in the Interior Fairbanks office. All three master's degree CRC. It's personal for them. They've been in the business doing this type of work forever. They're stellar managers for our division. So in closing, this is my brother and sister. My mother passed away. I did her eulogy. I thought about attaching the eulogy to this presentation, but you would have to finish the presentation for me after that eulogy. My brother and sister and I are to the right. Brother lives in Washington, sister lives in New Mexico. Vocational rehabilitation, serving people with disabilities. So I couldn't help myself. The picture to the left is Macrina Fazio. She worked for the Alaska Division of Vocational Rehabilitation for 33 years as a rehabilitation counselor and then as a manager. She's my rock. She's got her master's in her CRC. An Italian from Connecticut, moved to Alaska. I actually met her through work, fell madly in love with her because of who she is. So she has since retired. Now she's taking care of me, brings me a salad at noon every day. Doesn't have to do that. So if you want to work for the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation and you feel it's a part of your DNA, I will take an email or a phone call from you and let's talk, because I want to make sure that what I leave when I retire is that we have a rock solid division serving Alaskans with disabilities. And the final statement I would make is that we pay very well. So that's always a good thing to note. So thank you.
Thank you, Dwayne. As if your story wasn't hook enough for all of us. Nice little line there at the end. We pay well. As a mother of two daughters who decided that they would learn American Sign Language to help out the little boy at church, one of whom is continuing to become a sign language interpreter. I thank you for your story. When our recording is available, I look forward to sharing that with her as well. We do have some questions starting to come into the chat. And of course, as we go through these questions, if you'd like to ask your question of Dwayne aloud, then you can always raise your hand so that we can make sure that you can get unmuted and ask your question. Those of you who are on the phone, in Zoom, I believe it is *6 if you're on the phone joining us and would like to be able to ask a question. But Dwayne, we do have a question from Dana. What are some concrete suggestions about how people can work on, number one, not taking things personally, and number two, knowing what they do not know?
So for the first response would be not taking things personally. Let me just be the first to admit that I do at times take things personally. I call them life lessons. And so if I do take something personally, And then after the fact, once I calm down and think about what just happened, I will always take the time to circle back and to apologize to that individual for my behavior. So I think over time, as a young professional, being maybe at times just overly aggressive, we got to save the world. I took things personally on a regular basis. But I think that my wisdom of living now 65 years and being in the profession for 40 years, when I do that, the art of the apology is so powerful, genuine apologies. And so doing that, even if it's with your staff. And so when they see that you're human. So that's how I would respond to that. The second is, and I think the question was being impeccable to your word.
The second part was how would people know what they do not know? How would they know when they're in that kind of situation, perhaps?
Yes, thank you. I put that there because, and I'll give the example of senior and disability services. 8 years as their division director. When I showed up, they were under a massive corrective action plan and subjected to losing all of their Medicaid, Medicare dollars. Nobody bothered to tell me that when I showed up on day one as their director. And that's when I realized, am I in the right place? Our success for me was going around and talking to staff and being the first to admit, I may not know this topic, and so I'm going to rely on you. And so they appreciated that. I was a walkabout director. I would walk in, talk to an office assistant 1 or 2, and get some really great ideas. So I would always say, and they will smile if you were to go to them right now and say, to know what you do not know is the first sign of wisdom. And if you look around, there's a lot of people that are going to be entrenched in, I know everything. And you will see that. I grew up in a deaf household. I can see that in your look. Oh, you're not really being very honest with me. So be the first to make that statement, to know what you do not know is the first sign of wisdom, and rely on the people around you. Your success will be much more powerful when you embrace the people around you.
Absolutely. My dad likes to tell the adage about he who does not know and knows that he knows, he who knows not and knows that he knows not is a student, teach him. He also, very tall person, 6'8", and he knew that his ankles did not know how to play basketball, so he did not play basketball. So are there other questions? We do appreciate your little bit of stretch here while we wait for some other questions to maybe come in or somebody to raise their hand. We do appreciate this very powerful story. Mark Roseberry, are you able to come off mute?
Yeah,
there you are,
I have
Mark.
A question. So, Dwayne, what do you recommend when we're talking to different people, employers or whatever, people in working with people that are different or disabilities don't always know how to respond, and so sometimes they overcompensate for things, or I don't know, just feel uncomfortable. So how do you work with employers or other people that you're working with to make them comfortable with working with different groups of people that they may not be comfortable with?
I'm always very mindful to, the journey of that individual that I'm talking to, that employer who may have learned, has a perception about people with disabilities that he may have picked up from his community as a child growing up, or his mom and dad. And so when I sense and see that they're making some statements that are probably inappropriate, I do my best to try to teach them, to educate them respectfully, and to peel away at that onion to get to the core of what they're saying being very inappropriate. So we have a philosophy within our division. It's really a national philosophy, a two-customer approach, the client and the employer. And we just recently completed 4 professionally done videos that we're using in terms of testimonials of consumers that have made it, that we have served within our division, employers that can't get enough, they want to hire more people with disabilities in Alaska. And there's plenty of evidence to show that when you do that, it improves your work culture, it improves your performance, your retention goes up dramatically. Remember, my mom and dad, 35, 40 years in a factory. So many of the people that I have placed with disabilities in a variety of jobs still have those jobs. And those hiring managers will say, my God, so-and-so has been with us for 10 years. I said, well, they're grateful that you gave them that opportunity. I think about the statement that the employer made about my mom and dad going to work sick. They had that fear. Do you think that fear is still there? Absolutely, it's still there. So rather than coming in and being real radical and, a punch to the face and, shame on you, I take a more gentler, softer approach. And when they see that, then they want to see more of me. So create relationships with employers. So Mark, we will go in and educate employers. We'll do formalized presentations. I'm a director that has at least 12 staff that do that, but I'll be the first to say, you can send me in there because they're going to see it with me. They're going to see that it's important to me, that it's personal.
Thank you. Did you want to add on to that, Mark?
No, I was just going to say thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so as we finish up our time, you do have Dwayne's contact information in the chat box. Dwayne, I thank you. I thank your team at DFR across the state. I'm so glad that I get to partner with them and work with them. Your Anchorage team has come out to our offices at ACPE, and it was really nice to hear more about services and the no wrong door approach.
Yeah.
We get someone in who has shown that, yes, I need some assistance, I need some help, and where are we going to find that help and how do we get them connected? So we really appreciate that. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. You're welcome.
We are going to be going on a break at this moment. It's going to be about a 15-minute break. And so you will hear, much like we did yesterday, you will see the sponsor slides going across the screen and you will hear the music playing. We will be joining back together again at 10 a.m. And so there won't be, so much of a callback or that kind of thing, but the music will stop and we'll start back at 10 a.m. Thank you so much.
Kathy, I think we need to turn the music part on.
All right, I thought I did. I will go back. Better?
Perfect.
Folks, just a quick time check. We'll get started in about 1 minute. All righty, everyone. Welcome back from our break. I'm still thinking all about what Dwayne shared with us. It was a fantastic keynote, especially when we're thinking about accessibility. Amazing. At this point, I am going to go ahead and introduce our next sponsor moment. And really, we can't as effectively and efficiently run our amazing AlaskaCAN conference without our amazing sponsors. So I want to thank Ilisagvik College for their sponsorship, as well as all of our other sponsors for the AlaskaCAN conference. And with that, I believe I am turning it over to Emily Gueco and Asisoun Tubak. So I will turn it over to Ilisagvik.
Thank you, Pearl, Dr. Brower. I'm going to share my screen, and Emily and I are just going to kind of go back and forth. Okay, that's the wrong. There we go. Okay, let's see. So I'll start with, I am, like Pearl said, like Dr. Brower had said, I am Asisoun Tubak, Vanga Asisoun Tubak, or everyone calls me Asi. Vlalota Kuves to Miunga, Uvanga Uvlubak. I too am happy today. And I will start with our vision. So Ilisagvik's vision is to help build strong communities through education and training. Emily?
Good morning, my name is Emily Gueco. I'm the Dean of Students here at Ilisagvik College. The mission of Ilisagvik College is to provide quality post-secondary academic, vocational, and technical education in a learning environment that perpetuates and strengthens Inupiat culture, values, language, and traditions. We are dedicated to serving our students and developing a well-educated and trained workforce to meet the human resource needs of the North Slope employers and the state of Alaska.
Our lifetime pathway of learning, we start with elementary, community roles and career readiness, awareness. Middle school area is career paths and college awareness. Then high school, we do dual credit as well too. That's actually been pretty successful in some of our villages. In one village, I think we had 6 dual credits in a small village of like 200. So in a very rural village, so that our dual credit is pretty amazing. We also focus on career exploration and employability skills and development. At Ilisagvik, we help attain skills and employment placement.
Part of the pathway that Asi just spoke about does include some of the things on this slide as well. For that elementary, middle school, high school age range, we do a lot of pre-college programming. We do kids to college. We do glimpse for our middle schoolers. They come out to the campus every week on Wednesday, which is our early release day from the school district, and do an activity with our with one of the departments within the college. We also do summer camp programming in the summer, and obviously in the summertime, where we bring students from all over the state to participate in camps that focus on Indigenous studies, that focus on the Allied Health Program, which is one of our biggest programs. And we've recently started construction camps to kind of bridge that gap to the construction trade industry, which is also a big program that we have here at Ilisagvik. We have tuition waivers for North Slope residents, for Alaska Natives, and we also recently instituted a Board of Trustees scholarship program where 2 students from each village in the North Slope are given full tuition, full ride for their first year of college. And unlike some other scholarships, it's not based on the top 2 students. The principal of the school and the counselor work together to select the students that will come to Ilisagvik. And the hope that we do too, so that they hope to find a buddy and come with a buddy. Our current tuition is $185 per credit hour, which is among the lowest of the community colleges. And we have a huge distance education program. Our most popular programs and courses right now are Allied Health, which brings us to our new pre-nursing program, which we are collaborating with APU. We are so grateful for that program. Our business administration program, and then of course our new Back Studies program.
Yes, and I just want to reiterate the excitement on the Board of Trustees Scholars Program. I see the buddy system here and I'm seeing it work, and I'm so excited about that. I also wanted to add to the distance education. I want to say all of our academic courses are all accessible through online or distance. So that's pretty exciting as well too. The degrees we offer, we have 1 bachelor's degree, 12 associate's degrees, and 43 certificates in vocational, academic, workforce, and workforce development fields. So here's a list of the programs that we offer at Ilissalvik College. And in the previous slide, we talked about allied health and business management being one of the top ones as well.
In the school year 2020 to 2021, we had a total of enrollment of 911 students. We awarded 15 associate's degrees, 30 certificates, and 2 endorsements. 137 students awarded scholarships, and the average scholarship amount was $3,658 for a total scholarship award of $538,090. 76% of our students are considered post-traditional, which means they're 25 and older. Most of our students are adults with families, children. They've been homeschooling their kids for the last couple of years until this year. So it's very important that we be flexible with our students, and we are really great at providing that flexibility so that they can attain their degree goals and still take care of their family commitments. You will see that we awarded a lot of certificates, less than associate's degree, because we have our plan set up so that the students incrementally get certificates on their way to their degree program to get those small victories and keep them motivated to continue to their degree.
It is very motivating to get those little rewards at a time. So at Ilissalvik, we have a UI policy, or an unapologetically Inupiaq policy. Being unapologetically Inupiaq means that everyone is welcome, but when you elect to attend Ilissalvik, or when you elect to work at Ilissalvik, because we are electing to, students, staff, and faculty are going to experience an Inupiaq experience. Unapologetically Inupiaq means exercising the sovereign inherent freedom to educate our community through and supported by our Inupiaq worldviews, values, knowledge, and protocols. It is Inupiaq to be respectful to all.
These are some photos that our marketing department has taken of activities at the college. In the lower right-hand corner is 2 of our professors with their students that are studying snow chemistry. And the same, not the same group of students, but the same faculties are taking, I believe, 3 students to the annual snow conference in California in a couple of weeks, where they will present about their snow chemistry research that they've been doing here in Utqiagvik and across the slope.
Mm-hmm. And Koinak, that's all we have for Ilissalvik. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Ussie. Wonderful to hear an update. For those who don't know, I spent 13 years at Ilissalvik College, so a place near and dear to my heart. With that, I am going to turn it over to Shelley and Mark for our next panel.
All right, well, thank you so much. So next up is our accessibility panel, where we will have 3 panelists who will discuss different approaches to accessibility and post-secondary access in Alaska. So today we're going to have, our panelists will be Becky Toussaint, the president of ACTE, Angie Gaffretti, the CTE coordinator at UAS Ketchikan campus, and Dr. Pearl Brower, the senior advisor for Alaska Native Success, Institutional Diversity, and Student Engagement at University of Alaska. Each of our panelists will have 1 minute to introduce themselves. We're then going to ask 4 questions of each panelist, and they will each have 3 minutes to answer each question. And Mark will be our question asker, and I will pay attention to the time clock and try and keep everyone on track.
Yeah, thank you very much, Shelley. Just one clarification. I know we didn't talk about this yesterday. I asked each panelist the same question, and then we'll move on to the next ones. Okay.
Yes, and first they'll have 1 minute to each introduce themselves, and we could go in the order that I introduced you. each as well.
Yes. Okay. So we'll have 1 minute for you guys to introduce yourself. I can call out your names and then I'll ask the questions. Becky Toussaint.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for having us today. My name is Becky Toussaint. I am actually, my day job is the program director for Alaska Resource Education, which is an educational nonprofit that teaches students kindergarten through 12th grade about natural resources all over the state of Alaska. But I am also currently serving as the president for the Alaska Association of Career and Technical Education. And so I'm very excited to be here talking about accessibility and opportunities for students statewide. And we'll be mostly wearing my ACTE hat talking about career and technical education today. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Becky. And then I'll go on to the other panelists, but I'll ask you the first question first, and then we'll let the next panelist give a 1 minute introduction of themselves. So in your given role and experience, how do you interpret accessibility? And then, and I'll read the thing later because it is kind of long. So how do you interpret accessibility? And can you give an example of how it is relevant in your organization or career field? So the first part of that question is how you interpret accessibility.
Yeah, so especially with CTE, accessibility really looks like, how do we get kids opportunities? Most CTE classes, as we think about them, are hands-on, which inherently can have limitations for students with certain disabilities, or even just their remote nature and where they live in the state. So really finding ways to work around whatever hurdles are in our way, and making sure that students have the availability to still realize what they have potential for and what types of careers they can have staying right here in the state of Alaska.
Oh, Mark, you're muted.
So, yes, thank you very much, Becky. And next would be Angie Goffretti.
Angie Goffretti, yeah.
Goffretti, okay. Just share 1 minute about yourself, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Angie Goffretti. I'm the brand new career education coordinator at the University of Alaska Southeast Ketchikan, as well as I manage the welding and diesel power lab at our campus as well. I've been welding for about 10 years now. I am also an adjunct instructor for the metal art courses that we offer here on campus. And I am very excited to be here today. Thank you very much for having me.
And we'll ask you the same question on here. In your given role and experience, how do you interpret accessibility? And can you give an example of how it is relevant in your organization or career field?
I interpret accessibility in a couple of ways, mostly visibility, awareness, advocacy, and removing barriers to education and employment. For me, particularly around visibility, a lot of people, especially me growing up, thinking to myself in high school, well, I'm a girl, I can't weld, that's a boy's job kind of thing. The messaging that you're given from a young age of welder, probably about 6 feet tall, big, strong male, is just the messaging that you receive from that. And then you think to yourself, but what about there's the Rosie the Riveter aspect? There's the fact that me, 31 years old, woman, queer, Native Hawaiian welder also can exist out there. And trying to start from an earlier age, different perspective on being able to see people like yourself out there in the trades, and realizing that it's not just kids who have a math brain, kids who are mechanically inclined. It can be anyone, and you can do it. Pardon me, you can do it too. My big passion is, especially myself coming from a background of not really having the best financial upbringing in my life, realizing that there are opportunities outside of going to a 4-year college to go and get a degree. You can stay here in Ketchikan. You can go to our trades college that's right down the road, and we have scholarships for you to be able to stay in town, contribute to our economy here in town if a 4-year college is not for you. That's just my big passion about it. And could you restate the second part of that question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay. Let me get to that. Sorry, we had some people here and they just left on the plane. So the second part is, and can you give an example of how it is relevant in your organization or career field?
I can actually have an interesting story about that. Just a couple of weeks back, since I'm relatively new in this position, I'm going around meeting people in town. And one of our community partners reached out to me and said, like, well, hi, we have all of this funding available for minority women welder apprenticeship positions. Can you help us find minority women welder apprenticeship positions in this town? And I said, okay, this is the messaging that I would like to see more of in this town. That is okay. It's not just a man's job anymore. Anyone can anyone can do this if they realize that the opportunities are available to them. And how do we, as a college in this town, help our students from a younger age, middle school, high school on, realize that this is there for them?
Thank you, Angie, for sharing that. Dr. Pearl Brower, can you introduce yourself, and then I'll ask you the first question.
Sure, Mark. I think most people on this call have heard me quite a bit today. So uvan, excuse me, uvan naga connectons naga Dr. Pearl Kayan Brower. Okbeagaving miuronga sa vaktunga University of Alaska me. Senior Advisor for Alaska Native Success, Institutional Diversity and Student Engagement. So Dr. Pearl Brower, but much more widely known as Pearl. And I have the privilege of working for the University of Alaska as well. I am in the President's Cabinet at the System Office. And my official title is nice and long, but I'm a senior advisor for the whole university system on Alaska Native Success, Institutional Diversity and Student Engagement. And maybe just when we're thinking about accessibility, I'll add in a nice little that this is the first time that an Alaska Native person has served in the President's Cabinet at the University of Alaska in a little over 100 years. So when we're thinking about accessibility, I think that's really important. Not only do we have our first woman president, but we have our first Alaska Native person who is serving in a leadership position at the system office, which I can't wait till we aren't saying those things anymore, the first of all these, but it's important because I think that progress is being made. A little more about myself. Like I said before, I have come from a long line of thinking about accessibility. I was at Ilisaquivik College for 13 years prior to this, 8 of those as president. And before that, I actually did some work through college and through connecting students to resources and worked through an education and history grant. I'm a mom and have 2 little ones and reside in Anchorage. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah. Pearl, and congratulations on your position in the cabinet, President. In your given role and experience, how do you interpret accessibility, and can you give an example of how it is relevant in your organization or career field?
Sure. And I get to kind of come at the end because I think Becky and Angie have already brought some really incredible points to this. I think one of the things I think about when I think accessibility, I really think not one size fits all when we're thinking accessibility. We really need to be thinking about how are we meeting our residents, our students, where they are. How do we break down barriers so that no matter where someone is, whether they are just out of high school or whether they're 60 or 70 years old and want to go back, that they have a seamless and really supported transitionary period to get them into, whatever it is, whatever credentialing they want to be accomplishing. CTE, academics, workforce, the whole gamut. So really thinking about how are the barriers that are the processes that we've put in place, really, who are they supporting and what do they really accomplish? And are they making access really, truly accessible, making things accessible to students? When I think about an example, I too have a good one that just recently happened. So I'm about almost 7 months into my time at the university. And we all know the university plays an incredible role here in the state of Alaska. And I am a staunch supporter of higher education and think it is just it's the future for our state. But we also know that the university has a lot of challenges and it is a huge system and it's very bureaucratic. And so recently I was contacted by a high school student, And I actually don't know how she got my contact info, because she said that our program, the Alaska Native Success Initiative, had presented to her school. But we haven't been presenting to school, in my capacity. So I'm not quite sure, but I was really glad she reached out. So like I said, I'm a little new. So I'm thinking, okay, how do and I come from an institution that we had about 100 to 120 employees and, 900 to 1,200 students. So we were really very connected to all of our employees and all of our students. Fast forward to the University of Alaska has over, 20,000 students and thousands of employees, 5,000 employees, something like that. So I'm like, all right, who do I need to connect this student to? And the first person that I was like, all right, give me some information. It was, well, here's a website. Here's a website to where they can click on that website and they can register to become a student. And I just know that wasn't what was going to get this student in the door. And I've talked to other colleagues. So this is definitely a story that happens all the time. Rural students, really, and not just rural students, but untraditional students, just students and potential students are always given here's a website, here's how you can register for this class. So impersonal, doesn't allow for connectivity. In rural Alaska is really challenging because of our internet issues. So it was it was a perfect example. I wish I could use it all the time for, this isn't what's going to get that student in the door. We're going to lose that student right away because we're just saying, all right, here, log on and try and, fill out this form. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to rethink how we are connecting with students. And I will leave that as food for thought. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Pearl. On to the next question. So for Becky, how has the topic of accessibility played a role in reaching your current career path?
So I would say growing up, first I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian, but that didn't work out. So I ended up teaching high school science. And I realized as I was teaching my first year of high school science that I wanted to be a scientist before I tried to teach science to kids, because I realized when they'd ask, well, why do we need to know this? I didn't really know the answer because I'd only gone to college because that's what I was told to do when I graduated high school. So I moved to Alaska to come be a scientist. And one of my first jobs up here was traveling out to rural Alaska. And I remember the very first village I ever went to was Cold Bay. And I thought, where do the kids go to school here? And what kind of education is out here? And that really kind of was what started to spark my interest in teaching and in understanding how students in rural Alaska learned and what kind of education they got, because I had never seen anything like that before. And so once I learned about this organization that I now work for at Alaska Resource Education, a huge focus has been on access to education for our rural communities. And then as I have stepped into my role at ACTE, it is continuing to stay a focus because there are so many amazing learning opportunities that some schools just don't have the capacity, whether it's like Pearl saying, the internet, the connectivity, right? Some of those sorts of things. And so I think for me, it was more of a spark. It wasn't so much a challenge. I was very lucky to not have access and accessibility issues for my own personal education. But it has definitely sparked my interest in where I want to focus my career path and the work that both organizations I represent are doing.
Thank you very much, Becky. And Angie, how has the topic of accessibility played a role in reaching your current career path?
Very similar to Becky, actually. Well, I went to high school from 2004 to 2008. And back then it was all, well, you go to college because that's what you're supposed to do, was a lot of the messaging that we got, even though at 18, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And of course, 2008, the economy crashed. That was great. So a kid coming from a not very wealthy background, trying to make it through college. I graduated with a 4-year degree that I use now, but after that ended up going through some medical stuff of myself. And then after that all went through, I thought to myself, I'm going to do what I actually really want to do. I'm done with the messaging of why would you want to be an electrician, a welder, a plumber? Like, you're so smart. Why would you want to do that? Being told to me all the time. And so I tried and tried and tried. I'm originally from Portland, Oregon, and I was looking around for programs that would take someone, adult career education, not trying to go for a degree. I just want to learn how to weld. And I can't tell you how many times over 2 years I was just waitlisted because I was not male, veterans preference, tick off all of these boxes that aren't me. So I ended up escaping up here to Alaska to take our welding program occupational endorsement at AlaskaCAN, and then got hired, and here I am. I'm still here 4 years later. But the fact that this institution up here was willing to take someone who had minimal background in welding, I had a little bit of it working on a farm down south, and say, okay, we have 12 seats in our class. It's not, the student teacher ratio wasn't so high that it was, okay, I'll check off your welding. Okay, I'm going to run to another booth. It was personal time, one-on-one with instructors that knew that, okay, this is my background. This is a learning disability that I have. This is how I can work with you. And I felt so finally like, these are my people. This is what I want to do, because I want to be able to provide these opportunities for kids like me who might go here in Ketchikan and think, oh, college, that means I either have to go to Seattle or I have to go to a 4-year program, when we have a 2-year program right in our backyard here. So my I guess story for accessibility that it really brought me to this point where I'm going, okay, how can I help people like me who are floundering 16, 18? I can't do this thing that I really want to do because something is telling me that you should do something different. And really getting the messaging out there that it's no longer just a dumb person's job to get into the trades. I guess that was really the messaging that I was given when I was a kid, and that was really dehumanizing. And here I am now, trying to trying to make it easier for other kids like me, I guess is what my whole goal here.
Yes, thank you, Angie. And Pearl, how has the topic of accessibility played a role reaching your current career path?
Thanks, Mark. So I think on my end of things, I think of two different areas in particular. And when we think about our rural students and our Alaska Native students, especially across the state in Alaska, I'll note that as I progressed through, I grew up partially here in Alaska, but partially in Northern California, and in a very small community, smaller than Barrow. There are those out there, really small farming and ranching community who really, there was no one else like me and my brother there. But I think that when I got into college, and I went to community college in California and then came up to University of Alaska Fairbanks, something that really, I think, impacted me through that whole experience was the scholarships that are available and funding. And so I think as we think about accessibility, we need to think about how are we going to make sure that higher education, credentialing, all of the above are really affordable, because we still are really challenged, right, with a lot of the access. We don't want, one thing I said at Illy Salhovic, and I maintain it to this day, is that I would never want someone to say, gosh, I want to go to college, but I just can't afford it. So we really need to think about that, because everybody should have access to a college or education or training, whatever that looks like. And I'm really excited because I think, at least on the university level where I can speak to now, I think our Board of Regents is also very supportive of that. And each university is really looking at how to rethink funding. But a huge shout out to our ANCSA Education Consortium and the ANCSA Corps, who really provide incredible amounts of scholarship funding to our Alaska Native students. But just that there are really a lot of resources for funding around the state. And I think that really supports accessibility, but we need to be thinking about that and do more. The other thing I really want to put a shout out to that helped me get where I'm at today is really the Alaska Native and rural support services that are available at the University of Alaska. I certainly spent lots and lots of time at Rural Student Services at UAF. And it's one of those times where we still do not see ourselves as Alaska Native people in education. We still don't see ourselves very well represented. And so as we go through, there aren't many faculty, there aren't many administrators, there aren't some of our classes, there aren't many Alaska Native students in our classes. So finding that connection point, finding other people who get you and know you and look like you, and where the feeling is really comfortable. I think that was a huge benefit to me as a college student, making my way through the University of Alaska Fairbanks. I think we need to be thinking about ways to do that more. And of course, I know that the next question, or one of the next questions, is how is it kind of, how do we do that right now? But I think that through a lot of the work, we are making those things happening. But those were really incredibly impactful in my progression, moving through my life.
Thank you very much, Pearl. Becky, going on to the next question. What accessibility efforts are is your organization taking on to increase access to education and career pathways for underrepresented populations?
So I think the biggest things that ACTE is working on right now is working on connections and connectivity. So connecting teachers to teachers, teachers to students, industry to classrooms, and teachers or students to industry. I think really building out those networks and those connections so that, as Pearl mentioned earlier, just sending students to just a website or something like that is typically not enough, just like sending a teacher to a website or anything, right? But building those relationships, building those connections. So we have consortiums that we're working on building out so that communities can come to a hub or work remotely through a hub to get technical experts to help teach their students and those sorts of things, so that each individual school is not standing on their own, but we're working together in communities. We have the clearinghouse, which is going to be a portal of information for teachers and industry experts, and everybody can upload lots of things there so that we're not trying to reinvent wheels over and over and over, which we tend to see a lot in Alaska. Everybody's kind of in their little corner of the state doing their own thing. And there's a lot of great stuff going on. So we're going to try to put all that in one place so that if people are like, what's a good idea, like they can look there and see if somebody's already done it and has some lessons learned and some things that they can learn and make their program even that much better and stronger. We're constantly trying to build bridges between our industry partners and our educators. We know that teachers don't always have time to figure out who in the industry could help them, who the Angies of the world are that are willing to like go put in the work and talk to girls about being welders, those sorts of things. So having a point of contact or a point of reference to start really building out those connections and making sure that students have access to what they want and that they get to hear all these stories and know that there are Native women, in leadership roles or whatever it is that they're looking for. And helping bring connectivity to the classroom. I think one silver lining of COVID that we at least saw was an increased effort to get better connection, like connectivity excuse me, of internet to classrooms. And that's opening doors for access, because now the technical expert can be anywhere in the world and can zoom into a classroom. And it's obviously not the same as having them right there in person. But it's opening doors for students that would otherwise not be able to have those doors open for them. So I think that's, a huge piece of what we're working on is that connectivity and connectedness across the state. And then another huge thing that we're working on right now is work-based learning placements for students and trying to make that more accessible for all students, including students under the age of 18, which we know is one of the big hard numbers that put a lot of our students, especially in high school, right, are 16, 17, that sort of thing. So regardless of any other underrepresentation, just if they're under 18, that's been a huge accessibility issue for students. So we are taking that on at a policy level and trying to see if we can make some changes there as well for all students across Alaska.
Thank you, Becky. Angie, same question. What accessibility efforts is your organization taking on to increase access to education and career pathways to for underrepresented populations?
Well, for us specifically down at the Maritime Trade Center, we've all, as we all have been the last 2 years, there are plenty of our classes that, like welding, like diesel power, you can't really just teach it online. You kind of need to be hands-on in a lab, tearing apart an engine, not just reading a book about how to do it. So we've been doing our darndest getting people back in seats and putting out the word that we have these classes, these in-person classes. I know everything's kind of been on hold. And one of our big things that I'm very proud of we've been doing for the last 2 years, and we've actually been able to power through even with the pandemic going on, is our high school 4 college credit classes that we've been offering down in diesel power tech, and we're going to be building for our welding program. We, in the last 3 years, have our diesel engine simplified 3 credit college course. We've just tailored it to our high school students, and we have had a full class with waitlist every single term we have put that on. And that is a class that you can, if you take in your high school shop here in town, you can take our actual college level. It's not dumbed down course and get actual college credit before you even graduated high school. You get to work in the other labs. You get to see what other classes we offer. And we actually, with parental waiver, offer some of our trades courses like welding for age 16 and up kind of a thing. So you can, we've been building bridges with our 2 high schools in town for getting students to realize that, okay, I've currently got one student who's halfway through his AA and he just turned 18, as well as going to high school at the same time, so that he is getting it under his belt so he can go out and get a job as soon as he possibly can. But we're going out, we're presenting to the high school saying, hey, we have these courses, you're able to get scholarships for them. We're working with other businesses in town for that exact same reason. We've got like the Lund scholarship, we have the STEP grant funding and things like that for other students in town, not just our high school classes, but we are pushing the scholarships, as Becky said, like, hey, look, okay, you don't have a computer, we'll bring you the registration form. We are getting out there and talking to students who might not just have the obvious idea of this is even offered anymore, because whether it's pandemic or whether it's, okay, I can't afford this, these are everyone on our campus, from registration to the instructors, are basically pushing as hard as we can to let people know that, hey, we're still here, we're still running, we are still available to you to learn these hands-on courses.
Thank you very much, Angie. And Pearl, what accessibility efforts is your organization taking on to increase access to education and career pathways for underrepresented populations?
Well, thank you, Mark. So what I'm going to get to plug here for a few minutes is the university is doing so much. And so I know we have incredible university staff who are a part of our AlaskaCAN conference and who are participating today. So I may not get everything because there are so many really great things happening. So if you are doing other things than what I mentioned, please note them in the chat, because I think the more information we get out, the better. But the big thing I'm going to talk about is our Alaska Native Success Initiative. So, and I want to preface that kind of going back to, I'm going to just be able to hang on the coattails of Billy Sokovic for a little while, the unapologetically Inuit statement. And what that really means is that, that's what we're saying, that we were going to be unapologetic, but really everybody's invited, and really the work we're doing is good for everyone. And I think that really is representative of our Alaska Native Success Initiative. The work that is a part of that isn't just for Alaska Native students, it's for all of our students. It's for all of our underrepresented students, because the work is just good work. It's good work for students. It's good to be working in a direction that really does open up and makes our institution more accessible. So the Alaska Native Success Initiative went through about a whole year of development at the University of Alaska. Each university has a strategic plan, and then the system office has a plan, and they all roll up together to create our 5-year strategic plan that the Board of Regents actually passed in November. So we've just jumped into implementation. And what it really says is that the universities are really focused directly on the students and the staff and the faculty and kind of the people perspective, which is what they're supposed to do. Retention, recruitment, how are we going to creating spaces around their campuses and creating their whole campus to really be reflective of this place that we're in, this Alaska Native place that Alaska is. And then the system office really is looking at how are we going to train our employees and those who are working with us so that they are culturally sensitive and aware and talk about racial equity and all of those really important things that that maybe haven't been paid as much attention to in the past as they should be. How are we going to support the efforts to indigenize our entire university and our entire space? Because when our students come in and feel more comfortable and feel that they see themselves in these places and these spaces, so they are better set for success. We're going to look at how we can message better and how we can be connected to our partners, our Alaska Native partners, but just all of our partners across the state, really, so that maybe some of those silos that kind of Becky mentioned, you know, everybody's doing their own thing and they're doing really great things, but the more we can connect and the more we can move in the same direction, the better we will be as a state. We're so small, we're so connected, but we've just we're so big in a way. I think it's hard to make sure we have all the connections. Regional breakout groups would do really great to help support some of that. And so really, I think the ANSI, as we call it, the Alaska Native Success Initiative, is doing incredible work to bring attention to kind of that accessibility. You know, we're going to start to talk about how can we break down some of these barriers? How can we make it easier? You know, some of our students who maybe, or some of our residents across the entire state who aren't thinking about college, how do we create that college going culture so that they truly are? And I know that there's more, but I think I'm going to end there. And again, anybody else, please add things in the chat. And we could probably, you know, I could talk about ANSI all day long. So thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Pearl. All right, Becky, last question. Do you have any ideas or suggestions for AlaskaCAN and the audience for how they can be more intentional in making advancements around accessibility?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mark. I think, again, you know, I'm kind of going to repeat here, but share your resources, whether it's through something like the clearinghouse that we're building, if it fits there, and Felicia put the link in the chat if you want that, or I'm sure there's other great platforms out there that I don't even know about, but share your resources, make sure we're not reinventing wheels, build your networks as much as you can, take opportunities. Obviously, it's been hard the last couple of years where we're on Zoom. It's a little harder to network on Zoom, but you know, take these opportunities to build your networks. And then I think, and this is kind of a soapbox I love to get on, so I won't spend too much time on it, but we got to stop talking to each other about this stuff. And we got to start talking to other people outside of our circles, because I think a lot of us have a really good understanding and know and get some of this, but we really need to find ways to talk outside of these circles and have conversations with people that might have a slightly different opinion or a slightly different idea of what these things look like, and really start the conversations there so that we can spread the word of what we're doing and why it's important. And then I'm going to go out on a limb and say this with lots of university people on the call, but help stop saying that kids have to go to college, because there are so many kids, especially these kids that are in some of these underrepresented populations, that college is not for them. And for some reason, I know Angie said this, that's why we were taught, I was taught to go to school. I have my fancy pieces of paper. And I know that a lot of the kids that are out there that I've told to go into welding programs are making twice as much money as me now. So, you know, it's like, and I don't get a kickback, it's weird. But, you know, I think we just really need to start like making sure kids know that not going to a traditional four-year college is okay, and really telling people about all these amazing jobs and opportunities right here in the state. And, you know, especially in the industries that my, you know, at ARE we teach about in oil and gas and mining and some of those industries. You know, if they're working in rural Alaska or living in rural Alaska and they want to hunt and fish and continue some of those lifestyles, they can do that with 2 weeks of work on and 2 weeks off and those sorts of things. So really starting to have those candid conversations, and yeah, spreading the word about all the great work that everybody's doing. So I think that's it. I have lots of
Thank you,
ideas, but I
Becky.
think I'll stop there for the sake of
Thank
time.
you very much, Becky. Angie, do you have any ideas or suggestions for AlaskaCAN and the audience for how they can be more intentional in making advancements around accessibility?
I think a lot of it's definitely been said. I know Becky hit on a lot of the points that I was going to bring up about that as well. Like, make sure that the messaging is there, that it's not just for your degree or die anymore. Never has been and probably shouldn't be, that there are options available for you, as well as going to college doesn't necessarily just mean get a 4-year degree, get a 2-year degree, get a certification. You can just take a class because you're interested in something, and then we can help connect you to the folks in the industry. Oh, you took a refrigeration class, you're interested in that. Here's the mechanical shop in town that will help, that you should maybe go and talk to look into jobs that might help push you forward in your education by training you there. Another thing that it was touched on earlier today that's very important to me is, especially remembering we are in Alaska, we are in smaller communities that are much further apart than many other places in this country, as well as internet connectivity issues and things like that. One big thing that we saw especially during COVID, was having to throw so many of our in-person classes online. I had students that were like, hi, I don't have a computer. I can't come into this class that you're teaching because I can't get online. I don't own a computer at my house. And having the backup to say, okay, well, we have a loaner laptop program. Well, okay, I still don't have internet. Well, okay, how do we cater to the one student of our 12 that might be left behind, kind of a thing? Does this person, can he get a paper registration form? I actually ran a registration sheet to a student last night for this reason, to get him into the class, because he does not have a printer. Just remembering to, while technology is going so fast these days, and how everyone just assumes like, oh yeah, just hop onto the Zoom meeting at 10 o'clock in the morning. Maybe 11 of your 12 will be able to do that. But what about the one who wants to be there but doesn't have those resources? So slowing down and remembering that while we are moving at the speed of light, sometimes maybe not everyone else is. And how can we remember to gather that one last person in?
Thank you, Angie. Pearl, do you have any ideas or suggestions for AlaskaCAN and the audience for how they can be more intentional in making advancements around accessibility?
I do, but I think the one piece I think I'll leave us with is that I think the conversations, so communication, talking to each other, bring in, everybody has plans and everybody has like their goals and their mission, and everyone working in these areas want to bring in residents so that they can get trained, they can go to college, any of those pieces across kind of the continuum. But I think so often we miss the mark because we're not really thinking about those students, and we're not really thinking about what their needs are, or what their challenges are. If you're struggling with some of that, think about the conversations you could have or the communications you could have around that, so that you maybe can learn, listen and learn, bring in the population you're trying to attract, bring some people in, talk to them. What makes things work? What doesn't? How do they want to engage? Bring in other stakeholders who also are working with that population and maybe are finding success. For an example, I have just kind of thought that, through the University of Alaska, we should have, for some of our enrollment folks, we should maybe have some opportunities for them to talk to our ANCSA Education Corporation, who's working directly with all the students and giving them scholarships. They're the ones hearing all of the challenges those students are having. So why don't we start making connections and having some conversations in those areas, so that our underrepresented students have a better voice, and we listen and learn from that voice. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Pearl, and thank you, panelists, for sharing. And I do want to add one last thing when it comes to accessibility, and this is a new movement going on that's been talked about for a long time, but it's actually taking traction in its infancy. And that is with tribal education. The tribes are stepping up. They're setting up education. It's in its infancy, so you don't have a lot of them right now. But you have AFN that's doing research on tribal education. You have bills in the House, Senate bills and House bills for tribal compacting. And what I was talking to Shelley about this yesterday, and what happens we have forms, we have applications, we have processes that cater to public schools, and then we forget about the tribal schools and education. And, you know, I was even filling out, and we were talking about this very same thing yesterday. Well, your application doesn't work for our tribal education and our tribal school, because we are starting. I work for ICAS. It's a regional tribe, and we have a tribal school. But I've run into a number of processes that they're not ready to take tribal schools, or have programs that, well, we're working through a school system or a district or something, and we're saying, well, what about our students? And so keep that in mind as this movement is really taking shape, and these tribes are going to have more and more influence in education, because they know their constituents best, as Pearl mentioned, and they know how to work and support their citizens.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mark. Yeah, it was I realized as we were talking yesterday, I thought, I've had a couple schools that say, I'm not with a school district. I have a form that it's just for me that talks about school districts. So this has helped me to realize, in just that one little piece of accessibility where people feel like, well, I don't fit in this box. So how do I expand that? And so, so as we go into our breakout groups, one of the things we're going to be thinking about is how we can incorporate some of what we've been talking about and learning about today into our own roles where we are. So we're going to do, I believe we're going to have many breakout rooms. I just saw 6 groups, 10 people in each breakout room. And we want you to really stop and reflect a little bit on what you've heard so far today, on what you already know in your own daily lives, and use those to spur some discussion as we go in to answer a couple of different questions. We're going to pop the questions in the chat. We're also going to use Jamboard again as a place for you to collect your thoughts. And I believe, Dominica, correct me if I'm wrong on this, that our Jamboard is going to probably be color coded and most likely have group numbers on it. I would imagine.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. I see. I knew Dominica's on top of everything. And so our questions, there will be 2 of them, so we'll have plenty of time to talk about it. So as we go in, identify a scribe, please, as well as a speaker, because we're going to come report back out so we can share these conversations with the whole group here today. So with that, I think if anybody has any questions, now is the time. Otherwise, we will be jumping over to our breakout rooms in just a moment. And so the Jamboard link is there, so you can pull that up. You'll see your group number when we jump in, and we'll have the questions. Looking at the takeaways, what is something your organization can commit to, or commit to discussing regarding accessibility? And then, as members of AlaskaCAN, how can this discussion and topic make a positive impact on post-secondary credential completion in Alaska?
Are we ready?
I think we are. Take us away, Kathy.
Okay, see everybody in 20 minutes. Hi, Santa. This is Kathy LeCompte. I'm the facilitator for the conference. Welcome to our group. Everybody's in breakout sessions, and so I assume you just want to hang out and
Yes,
not join the session.
probably. I apologize. It's just been crazy. And
Oh, that's
Kathy,
okay.
one day I want to set a time to meet with you.
Sure, I would love that.
Me
Yeah.
too. But no, I'm jumping in. I'm supposed to do the little ACPE sponsor time, and we have a bill. I am meeting with legislators just left and right. I'm trying to get it on the floor, and oh goodness.
Say no more. I understand. I understand that a lot. So we are right on time. Shelley is doing all the facilitation of this, and she's right on the money, you know. So we are scheduled to come back from this breakout session here momentarily. And then so we will introduce you right at 11. She will introduce you right at 11:20, or Barbara will, one of them.
That's great. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, then I'm going to turn this, I'm going to go back off, and
Me
we'll
too.
see you in a minute.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so now we're gonna, let me turn my camera on. Sorry, I think everybody should be back. And we're gonna, with the groups that we have, we're gonna take about a minute or so to share out and report out. If each one of you can start, and we'll start with group one. And we really appreciate your input, and please raise your hand and we will call on you. And if you don't see any hands, we will call on groups by number and look forward to hearing what you discussed. So thank you so much. And I believe Barbara is up next with another introduction. So we're gonna have the report backs. Anybody want to report back, or should we just go with the groups? Anybody have their hand raised that want to? I think it'll be easier. We'll just start with each group one, and go forward to group 2, 3, 4. There's a lot of people. I don't know if I'll see all the hands.
And I was in group one. We were trying to find a speaker. Is there anyone that wanted to speak out other than me? I'm happy to do if need be. So we had a really good conversation. We took the biggest chunk of our time was talking about ways that we could commit. So everything from what you and I talked about yesterday, Mark, adjusting our forms. Not everybody fits in the same box. And as we encounter situations where we realize, oh, this is an accessibility issue, figuring out ways that we can all make those changes and make those adjustments, and what's going to be most appropriate to make sure that everyone's identity, as we talked about yesterday, is really embraced, and that everybody feels really, accepted with everything. So we also talked about alternative pathways from tribal school to tribal college. Talked a little bit about that. We talked about tangible support. So, everything from, the SAGVIC bringing people to school in vans to students who don't have access not only to broadband, but maybe they have broadband, but they have no laptop. So how do we do that to, we're all moving forward in this digital way, which is super helpful for some people. And so it's important, but also maintaining that paper pathway and maintaining some of those traditional ways, because that's better for some people. And so a lot of those things, lists and infographics and different videos, like lots of different ways of communicating the same idea, as well as looking at hiring practices. So how are we making sure they are accessible? Not, within our own institutions where we work. So those are some of the things you can look on the group page. I don't want to take too much time. But then as AlaskaCAN members, how can we make a difference? And so continuing to look at outcomes and if they're proportional, thinking about kids in state and tribal custody. And we talked about maybe looking and seeing, is there a way when those funds get placed on hold for those students who are some of our most at-risk students, is there a way that we could advocate and maybe work with, Amanda Mativier, who we talked with at one of our last convenings regarding students in the foster care system, but could that be put into like Alaska 529 instead of on hold, so that it's there for the students when they are older and need access to those funds? And then solidifying our regional networks so that we can work together on addressing accessibility and barriers, and locally, as well as collectively through AlaskaCAN to advocate in larger numbers. So there's a few more things on there.
Yeah, thank you very much. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh no, and Emily just added another piece in the chat, especially liking the at least 3 ways to reach people. It's a really good reminder that things are often very text heavy, and there's lots of different ways that we can reach out.
Thank you very much. So next is group 2. I know I was in there, and would somebody like to speak from that group?
I'll do it, Mark.
Yeah.
So I'll just do a couple quick highlights. Alaska Military Youth Academy brought up that, again, kids don't always have computers or printers, but they all have smartphones. So they're trying to figure out ways to engage kids using their smartphones in bringing technology to what they have. So, and then APU is starting to send out digital materials versus printed materials, like a loaded USB drive, so that kids don't have to worry about the connectivity. I know that UAS Sitka sends out a loaded iPad with curriculum, so that you don't have to worry about connectivity. And what we could do as members, mindfulness of communication and opportunities. So persistence and engagement, bring this topic to every meeting that you have. We have to keep bringing it to the forefront and to move the message forward.
Thank you, Felicia. And group 3, do you have a speaker?
I do. This is Pearl, and I was asked to be our speaker. Real quick, I think the things we talked about when we were committing or commit to discuss regarding accessibility, really the how do we connect with rural Alaska, travel assistance, how do we find housing for programs on campuses that may not already have housing, making sure that dual enrollment actually is a pathway, or you actually receive a recognized certificate with each dual enrollment program. We talked about how to make sure to have conversations around shifting from grant funding to general funding for a lot of these programs, because most of them come to us through grants. And so when the grant goes away, what do we do? And then talks around lobbying the legislature to fund these kind of, industry specific education, because of course they are all incredible advocates for that. And then how to, the impact, we talked a lot about the communication piece and having community discussions, town halls, just even, talking with, people we're connected with, what do you want to see? What do you need to see? What's coming down the pike? So a lot of communication. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Pearl. Next is group 4. Do you have a speaker?
If somebody from group 4 wants to talk besides me, they can, or if they want to add on, please do. But one of the pieces that we looked at was having more opportunities for professional development, so we can lay the foundation in each of our areas and with our different groups that we work with. Integrating values beyond the visual, because that's not how everybody's taking in their information. And Ilosavik let us know that there's a program in their area called Guys and Gals Read. And so they bring in someone who's completed at least a certificate, and they come in and choose a book, and they read that book to kindergarten and have a discussion about what they do. And so the idea there is you can do this, like be an accountant, but you can also be on a whaling crew. So the idea, you can do this and something else as well. And we also talked about when there are new initiatives coming out, there really some good time is spent on the implementation planning with the time, the resources, skills, and specifics, so that when it comes time to looking at the ROI, that we really can find out what's going on, not just kind of throwing things together and putting it out there almost like a Band-Aid. And we talked about our yes, we can work with high school students and work with them on their transitions, but the reminder that in Alaska, we have the highest population of adults who have no post-secondary education or incomplete post-secondary education, and we need to focus on them, help them find the champion, help them with reducing the intimidation and the barriers, and make sure that they understand you can.
All right, thank you, Julia. Group 5.
Hi there. Group 5, we talked also about accessible hiring practices and just ensuring that all of our hiring managers take that into account whenever we're hiring new applicants. Also, we talked about accessibility in buildings during emergency situations or even during non-emergency situations, making sure it has a universal design. including not just the buildings, but rooms itself, making sure if a student were to come in, no matter their case, no matter their accessibility level, they would be able to take that class no matter what. Making sure that accessibility is on the agenda for continued improvements every year, that it's something to keep in the forefront of improvements, just like you would processes, or just like you would, budgeting for more materials, just something to continue to improve upon. Something we also talked about was positive spins on what came out of the pandemic. And so access to mental health services, students and staff members were able to access our mental health services in different ways they were not able to before, including Zoom meetings or telecalls or to calls. And so that was a positive spin on it that they didn't necessarily have before, and something we're also going to continue with. But same with just workshops in general, workshops that departments are able to put on for students, and workshops that departments are able to put on for staff that hold a lot of important information. So they were able to access that just a little better now because of just a new way we're able to provide that to them. And so we're going to take that back and just continue to improve upon those outreach opportunities and just access for all students and staff and faculty. So it's just about removing barriers and improving visibility overall, for sure.
Thank you, Reba. And group, I think we're on 6, or is it 7?
Group 6. So we had talked about collecting and utilizing student data and the opinions about needs in regards to accessibility, and then also the commitment to continuously updating technology and accessibility accommodations, make sure that's up to date. Finding ways to invite students to openly communicate with us. One of the discussions was in regard to being able to really communicate with students and having that conversation, like how do we know if there are specific services or accommodations that might be needed, and being able just to kind of have that discussion. So we also touched on accommodations in the hiring process and making sure that resources and accommodations were kind of visible and safe. There was one suggestion that they were looking at utilizing chat boxes, and hoping that would be brought to their website sooner than later, and utilizing lower bandwidth and kind of being able to cater to that, as well as being mobile accessible and friendly, and then also using inclusive language. As part of the discussion in our group for credential completion, one was the ability to connect with one another and to be able to see other perspectives, connecting also with professionals and like-minded, goal-oriented people. As conversations increase, the compassion and understanding of others might also be helpful. And then having a space to have that healing and understanding, really building that relationship and allowing that to work out. The broadness and accessibility is significant, and being able to see other examples is also helpful. And then we talked about resource and strategy sharing.
All right, thank you, Jacqueline. Group 7.
Actually, Mark, we're going to have to put that off till maybe a later time, because
okay, thanks,
we're
Barbara.
a little behind time. I'm sorry. And so it is my pleasure to introduce our next sponsor moment, Sana Eford, the Executive Director of Alaska Commission on Post-Secondary Education. Sana, are you available?
I am on, and I'm going to see if I can share my screen and walk through this quickly. All right, can everyone see my screen? Good morning, my name is Santa Eford, and I am happy to be with you. I'm the Executive Director of the Alaska Commission on Post-Secondary Education, and I just hit my 1-year mark. And last year, for the AlaskaCAN conference was really my first official presentation really in my new job as the executive director. So I'm happy to have a few minutes to chat with you today and share resources from ACPE. I do want to apologize. I had hoped to be able to attend the whole conference, and I'm so sad I'm missing such great information as I could hear from all that was being shared out from the groups today. The legislative session is running a little ragged. We have some things, some bills and legislation, so have been trying to work through that. But again, good morning and thank you for letting me be here. So I wanted to share quickly our mission for ACPE. Whoops, I think I just, oh, I'm going the wrong way, sorry. There we go. Our mission is to promote access to and success in education and career training beyond high school. And our mission in action is portrayed through programs where we provide financial aid and loan for college and career training, education planning resources for students, schools, families, and stakeholders, early post-secondary outreach programming for grades K through 8, advocacy and support for post-secondary participation in Alaska, and institutional authorization and consumer protection for our students. And I know that I don't need to share really understanding the why with this group, but I will quickly say, we know, all of you in this conference understand that 65% of Alaska's jobs in 2025 will require some type of post-secondary credential. We also know that Alaska, even though our graduation rates have been increasing, we still have one of the lowest high school graduation rates. And we are still the lowest in FAFSA completion rates compared to the national average. We also have the lowest rate in the nation of high school graduates that in college enrollment, persistence, and completion. And a number of you were just sharing from your last discussions. We have the highest number of Alaskans that have some post-secondary training, but they have not completed their programs. So ACPE wants to heighten advocacy and awareness regarding equity gaps and access to and attainment of our post-secondary education programs in Alaska. How can students, Alaskans, fund post-secondary programs? And I will share briefly in a survey that was done during the past 2 years with COVID and what's been happening in our nation. The survey showed that the top reason students were not attending post-secondary programs was because of financial concerns. So how can we help that? We need to really focus on FAFSA completion and our student outcomes. 92% of seniors who completed their FAFSAs enrolled by the November after their high school graduation. That is from NCAN and their data and information. So we can see that FAFSA completion is a huge piece of helping our students and Alaskans enroll and persist in their post-secondary programs, compared with 51% who did not complete a FAFSA. Additionally, every $1,000 extra in grant aid, the student in post-secondary increases their persistence in that program by 4%. And FAFSA completion is required For our state financial aid programs, the Alaska Performance Scholarship and the Alaska Education Grant. Our FAFSA deadline is June 30th. However, students can be completing them right now, and we'll talk about our resources to help with that. Again, I wanted to share quickly, if anyone is not aware of the 2 financial aid state programs that are available to Alaskans, we administer the Alaska Education Grant, which is a need-based application. So students must complete the FAFSA in order to be eligible for this. The awards range from $500 to $4,000 per academic year. The Alaska Performance Scholarship is up to $19,000 across 8 semesters. There's eligibility criteria, and you can see each of those pieces. And the application, again, is the FAFSA, and it must be filed before June 30th. And students in order to use this must be enrolled in an Alaska institution. I also wanted to take just a minute to highlight right now, Representative Andy Story has introduced a bill, and the number is HB 48, and it is intended to help improve some of the equity gaps and the eligibility pieces for the Alaska Performance Scholarship. So we are excited to support that. If you're interested, please look up her bill, and there will be another hearing on it this Friday morning. No, either Friday morning or afternoon. You can look on the legislative website during the House Education hearings on Friday. Again, the ways, many different pieces to put together for a financial package for students. The federal aid must complete the FAFSA, our state aid programs, other institutional aids, and of course, private and public scholarship funds that are available for our Alaskans and students here. We also at ACPE administer loan programs, and just briefly a highlight on that, our programs, we continue to look at data and information, and our loan programs are still, on average, our loan rates are lower than average national private fixed rate loan, and Alaska students pay $6,400 to $20,000 less over the life of their loan by borrowing from ACPE. And again, I have all my wonderful staff that have been part of putting together the AlaskaCAN conference. And I know you have spoken with them, but I just want to highlight the resources and education programs that we also have and provide. The Alaska Career Information System, AKCIS, an online personal learning and career planning system, free to Alaskans. And Julia maybe has talked to many of you, but we are doing a localization, an Alaska localization update on this system to help incorporate the upcoming workforce needs for Alaska, and are excited about that effort and to be able to roll that out soon. We also have our Alaska College and Career Advising Consortium, and all you can see here, the statewide initiatives, the training that is provided through Dominica and Christina, and of course, Shelley. And the one piece I want you to know from ACPE and our perspective is we want to hear from our stakeholders that the trainings and the education we're providing are relevant and meet the needs of our stakeholders. So again, I want to share with you our resources that you can see. You can go to our website, and download materials. And again, please contact us and let us know how we can support, or if there are other areas that you feel we should be addressing in our training and opportunities that we provide for students and our post-secondary programs in Alaska. I thank you for your time, and I appreciate all of you and your efforts to increase the completion and the futures for Alaskans and supporting the needs for our state and our economy. Thank you all.
All right, thank you so much, Santa. So next up, we wanted to talk a little bit about the upcoming elections. And let me see here. So each year, AlaskaCAN board brings on new board members. We stagger our seat terms so we keep a nice balance of seasoned members and new members on the executive team. So yesterday, you should have received an email with your election ballots. And prior to making your votes, we wanted to give each of our candidates the opportunity to share and introduce themselves to you. And so I'm going to share my screen here, make sure that you guys can all take a look. We like to make sure that we have a diverse board covering a lot of different areas. So for our at-large candidates, we have Joshua Bicanella and Marcy Herman. Our post-secondary education, we have Amy Brister, Whitney Williams, and Shanice Lawton. For rural Alaska, we have Noelle, I'm not sure if it's Bo or Bowie, and Bessie Weston. So my apologies if I'm getting anyone's names wrong. And then secondary education, we have Kim Berge, Missy Fraze. For state agency, Leslie Bynes, and our student candidate is Teresa Novakovic. So I would ask if Marcy is here, if you want to unmute yourself and have a moment to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Shelley. My name is Marcy Herman. It's always hard to follow Santa Eford, but I will do my best. She was my boss for the last couple of years that I worked at the Alaska Department of Education and Early Development, and it's always an honor to work with Santa. She's so gracious and wonderful. Like I said, I'm Marcy Herman. I work at Cook Inlet Tribal Council. I am the Director of Strategic Projects and Initiatives. As my bio says, I oversee digital badging. We have a grant with the department to develop ways to remove barriers in K-12 public education for Alaska Native and American Indian students. That is primarily, actually, that is all we serve right now, are Alaska Natives and American Indian participants. So it's going to be a lot of hard work, but extremely exciting. And our CEO, Gloria O'Neill, will be co-leading that with Aaron Leggett from the museum, the Anchorage Museum. Part of the reason that I am interested in joining this board, I think my bio shows that I have tons of experience in education. I have a passion for kids' outcomes. I myself did not finish my degree until 2019. It took me over 30 years to do it. So not only Alaska can, but everyone can. I was listening to Santa talk about how we have such a high rate of individuals who haven't completed their degree, but also their certificates. And so that is really important, not just for the statistic number, but it makes a difference it made a difference for me in how I felt about my work and applying for jobs. I never have to worry about not checking that box anymore, that I have some sort of post-secondary education. So, but the other part is CITC has a fabrication laboratory that we put together with MIT in 2013, but we this year are expanding it to a super fab lab at a new site on Grass Creek in Anchorage out near Muldoon, where Krispy Kreme is. Most people in Anchorage will know where that is. And we will be expanding our youth services and our adult and community membership. So we will be serving more Alaska Native, American Indian participants, students, but we will also have this little piece where we can serve non-natives, non-American Indians. So we're interested in how we take the Fab Lab, high school students, middle school students to the next step, to post-secondary training, any kind of credentialing that relates to our digital badging. I could talk forever, so I will stop so I can give other candidates enough time. But thank you so much for your consideration. And I see many familiar faces. Dr. Vanas and I worked at the department together. Felicia and I worked at the department together. Kathy Lecomte and I have mutual friends in Juneau, or they're not in Juneau anymore, but I could go on. But honestly, this time I'm stopping. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcy. It's great to hear from you. I'm not sure, we all are such busy individuals and sometimes we have conflicts come up. I'm not sure that Josh Bicanella is able to join us today, so I'll pause for a moment. But I don't think he is. But Josh Bicanella is a program manager for Charter College, a private independent institution located in Anchorage, Alaska. Josh holds a master's degree in management and leadership from Western Governors University and is a doctoral candidate at Walden University, pursuing a doctorate in public administration. He was born and raised in Alaska, is an avid Alaskan, embracing all things outdoors, and when not actively engaged in work, community activities, or public service, he enjoys hunting, fishing, camping, and of course, hiking. Josh has spent many times working with the AlaskaCAN board, and is also another candidate for the at-large seat today. Our next candidates, we have 3 candidates running for the post-secondary education seat. So Amy Brister, if you are here and want to unmute yourself, and everybody has about a minute or so.
Thanks, Shelley. I'll be quick. My name's Amy Brister. I'm with the University of Alaska Fairbanks. In my current role, I run the Alaska Advantage program and I'm the dual enrollment coordinator. So primarily I work with high school students taking college credit and giving them that pathway, which is a huge passion of mine. It's something I've worked a lot with at the university in my 20 years. And also, the other part to what I've done with the university is worked a lot with students and meeting them where they're at, which is, I think, a wonderful thing with the University of Alaska, is that we're an open enrollment institution and we can bring students in at an occupational endorsement all the way to a PhD. So I do have a strong passion for that. I also really feel strongly about industry and making sure that we work with those partners. My husband has that background. So, and then finally, I think the other part that isn't in my profile is that, I grew up in Alaska, grew up in Wasilla. I had no idea what I was doing when I graduated from high school. I literally didn't even know if I had applied to the University of Alaska Fairbanks, but I drove here anyways. I also had no idea if I had done the FAFSA. Like, I literally had no clue, and I showed up on the doorstep here. And so that's the part that I think I bring a lot to working with students, is helping them through that process and making it less scary, and asking lots of questions about what their passion is, and helping them through that. So the final thing I just want to say is I've been on the advocacy committee for the past year, which has been some great work. I would encourage all of you, if you're not on the board, you can still be on one of the committees. And so I know that there's a lot of space for that. And so if you have a passion for one of those things, like, get involved. It's a great way to get involved with this group. That's all I have, Shelley.
Thanks, Amy, and thank you for your time on the advocacy committee. I have been very grateful to have you on that team. So yes, everybody is welcome to join committees. Next up, we have Shanice Lawton. If you would like to unmute and share.
Can everyone hear and see me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Shanice Lawton. I am currently working as an academic advisor here at Alaska Pacific University. I also am an adjunct in the business department as well. I have been in higher education since 2017. It's a career that found me. I like to say it found me, and My passion found me within higher education. I have worked with non-traditional students and high school students. Those are my two favorite populations to work with, is non-traditional students. And I get a chance to teach them every day, well, once a week within business classes. The reason why I am running for board of directors is because last year when I got a chance to be involved with AlaskaCAN, I fell in love with their mission. And I think it's important that everyone get that opportunity to have some sort of accreditation, regardless of what it is, and have that access. And that is something I am very interested in, is having access to higher education, which is a huge part and will be a huge part of my dissertation as I'm working on my EDD as well. I guess that is enough about me. I hope you guys have a great day.
Thanks so much, Shanice, and thank you for all of your time volunteering with the I Know I Can Kids to College events. Our next candidate is Whitney Williams, who also was unable to join us today. Whitney holds a BSW degree from Fontbonne University and a Master's Social Work degree from Southern Illinois University in Edwardsville. Ms. Williams has dedicated her career to empowering underrepresented populations in their pursuit of a post-secondary degree. And she currently serves as the TRIO Student Support Services Director at the University of Alaska, Anchorage. Our next category is Rural Alaska, where we have two candidates, Noelle Bowie and Bessie Weston. Noelle, would you like to unmute and tell us about yourself?
Sure. Good morning. I'm Noelle Bowe. Easy way to remember my name is sounds like no elbow. I am a teacher here in rural Alaska. I've been out here for 5 years. I teach special ed and I'm also a school counselor. I grew up in Wasilla. I did my undergrad at UAA. I got 2 other graduate degrees, one at Western Governors and then also at UAF. I've been lucky to be a recipient from a lot of resources from, like ACPE and stuff like that. And that really helped me with my post-secondary education. As a school counselor and special ed teacher, I want to be able to help my students bridge gaps and receive really cool opportunities, stuff that we've worked with our students through the different BB organizations out here. Some of my seniors have been taking courses online with the Bristol Bay campus, and one of them will be graduating with 40 credits already, which is really exciting. My main goal for joining and participating in this is just to be a persistent advocate for students and rural communities out here. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much, Noelle. And Bessie Weston. If you'd like to unmute yourself. And I'm not sure, Bessie, I know you had sent us a video, but I also know you're here. So if you can let us know if you prefer to share or have us watch the video you made. Okay, so with that quiet, I'm going to, now hopefully nobody can hear this. So, and Dominica, if you have quicker access to it and want to share, oh, Bessie, she was on and then jumped off. Okay, so I know she had a conflict. Dominica, if you're able to share the video faster than me, please do. My apologies. I'm not even hearing it myself. So.
One moment, Shelley.
Okay, and I'll keep working on it. Sorry, everyone. I'm going to do a quick stop share and see if I can do it again with sharing sound. I might have it here, you guys. Let's see. Okay.
Hi, I'm Bessie Weston, nominee for
No, you
the
guys
Rural
can't hear that,
Alaska.
can you?
We can. Yeah.
You can? Oh,
yeah,
good.
we could hear it. And Bessie just logged in.
Oh, okay. Bessie, if you are there and want to unmute, would you like us to play your video or would you like to share directly?
You can go ahead and just play the video. I will have a couple seconds after to add a couple things. Thank you.
Okay, and you guys please jump out and let me know if you can't hear.
Hi, I'm Bessie Weston, nominee for the rural Alaska seat. I'm Jupik Eskimo from Mikoyak, Alaska, Nunivak Island. I am a tribal member under the Native Village of Mikoyak, a shareholder with the NEMA Corporation, a shareholder with Jalista Corporation. I currently work as a grant writer for the city of Mikoyak. I serve on the Board of Education for the Lower Kuskokwim School District, as well as a secretary position for the Mikoyak AVAC board. This position would help me to reach my personal wish to have more Alaskans, specifically rural Alaskans, credentialed in order to build and sustain a healthy workforce. So let's do this.
Great, thank you so much. Let me go back over here. So our next, and please let me know if you guys can't see.
Shelley, I think Betsy wanted to add something at the end.
That's right, Bessie. Yes, please.
Sorry about that. Thank you so much. I literally, my plane is on the way. I had intended to be on the plane right now, but I wanted to add a couple things. As I mentioned, I am a product of Rural Alaska Public Education as well as the University of Alaska system. I use no counselors, so I have the background and knowledge on how to do things yourself, but I also am very capable of asking for help and knowing where to get. I'm very resourceful. So I would hope that my background in pursuing higher education or other credentials, for that matter, would be helpful to this board. I need to go catch my plane though, so thank you all for your time.
Thank you so much, Bessie. So our next category here we have is secondary education. We have two candidates, Kim Berge and Missy Fraze. Missy, if you want to unmute yourself.
Hi. Thank you for the chance. I'm Missy Fraze, and I am the CTE director here in the Anchorage School District. I've been in education since 2003 and been in career and technical education. So a lot of focus on credentials, post-secondary credentials, as well as dual enrollment. One of the things I'm pretty passionate about in secondary is dual enrollment, and looking at how we can use dual enrollment as an equity lever for our student populations. Anchorage is a diverse school district, and so that's what I'm passionate about, in the advocacy around that, to improve the post-secondary transitions for our students. And I look forward to an opportunity to serve the state and the board.
Great, thank you so much, Missy. And Kim Berge.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kim Berge. I've been in education here in Alaska for many, many years. I am a product of our Alaska schools, from elementary all the way through past my graduate degree work. So I currently work in the homeschool setting, and I've been working on some really large grant projects to help bridge some of these gaps for our kids that are not only in homeschool, but in our rural brick and mortar schools. And so a lot of the work that we've been doing goes around that realm of how do we get these kids to successfully transition from high school into that post-secondary work, whether they're going the academic route, the military route, right straight to work, CTE, whatever the case may be. So we've been doing a lot of dual enrollment, and Amy, your program has been instrumental in helping us move forward with a lot of that. And so I just want to say a public thank you for that, because it is super, super important. The more we can help these students bridge these gaps, the better it's going to be. And there's a myriad of ways in which we can do that. And you can see from the little bio that I sent in, my background is really diverse. I'm one of the few people that's worked from that infant child education side all the way through adult ed. And I've been part of just about every education option that's available in Alaska, whether it's homeschool, boarding school, whatever. So I'm familiar with all of those. And I currently serve on 2 state level committees for one for juvenile justice and the other for the Professional Teaching Practices Commission. And so I also serve on some other private boards in the community as well. And so for me, it's all about how can we get kids connected to the passion that they love, whether it's through dual enrollment, whether it's through alternative school options, whatever it is, we just need to get them excited about where they're going, what their next steps are. And that can start young. We've done some work with our early elementary kids, and that's been a huge driver for their success later in school. And so, you know, even though I'm here on that secondary ed piece, I can see the value of helping to bridge for those kids in rural Alaska, because that's where I grew up. That's where I started teaching, in addition to starting with those younger ages to get them really excited and passionate about what they want to do when they're older.
Great, thank you so much, Kim. So our last 2 categories, we have state agency. Leslie Vines, would you like to unmute?
Okay, my name is Leslie, and I apologize in advance because I'm driving, but I am representing the Department of Labor Workforce Development. I am the at-risk coordinator for the state, and so I'm interested in all things youth. I am a single mother of 3. They was all born and raised in Alaska. My youngest daughter is also Alaska Native. So, and she will be the first one in her family that completes high school and go to college. So I am interested in all things youth. And so I would love to get to know other colleagues, and I want to, you know, help all the youth. So I want to be part of your team and to help me grow my skills. But I have a master's in management. I come from nonprofit before I came to the state of Alaska. So, but my master's is in management, and I am thinking about pursuing my doctorate, but we will see. So that's all about me for now.
Thank you so much, Leslie. And our student seat, we have Teresa, am I say it right, Novakovic?
Yes, A+. Good job. My husband jokes that just think of Nova hatchback. That's kind of close to Novakovic. But thank you for allowing me to give a couple of moments to speak. I'm a new member of AlaskaCAN, and when I learned about this organization, I really wanted to be involved. I grew up here in Alaska. I started my first class at UAA in 1987 as a young adult, and shortly thereafter dropped out to marry and raise a family. It was a very intentional choice. I kind of felt like I was in a fork of the road and I could do one or the other. And I spent many, many years, raised 5 children. Through a series of unfortunate events, when my children were older, we hit a financial crisis as a family, and I found myself in an entry-level job, not making a lot of money and having the ceiling very low for me because of my lack of post-secondary education. And I quickly found out that I had a lot to give. I had a lot of experience. I had a lot of talents and skills that could really contribute to the organization I was working for. And as Marcy said earlier, I couldn't check that box. And I had a lot of apprehension, fear, intimidation of going back to school. It had been over 30 years since I had attended college. And I fortunately was able to connect with some people who served as mentors, who held my hand, who connected me with financial resources. And I was able to re-enroll in UAA at 53 years old. And I will be, I'm in my last semester. I'll be graduating in May with a Bachelor of Arts degree in sociology. And just in that process has opened up doors for me professionally. I started as an admin assistant for the South Central Alaska Area Health Education Center 5.5 years ago. I am still with them. It's a wonderful organization, and just recently was put in as the director in December to replace Maricel, who some of you might know. And if it hadn't been for the educational opportunities that I've had, this certainly wouldn't have happened. So I'm very passionate about spreading the word that it is possible for anyone to get a post-secondary education. There are resources out there that a lot of people don't know about, and more resources that I would like to help develop too. So glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to stop my screen share, and Barbara, I think, is going to have some final words. My apologies that we've run a little long.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, we did run a little long. Thank you to all the new nominees that want to be a part of our board. I wish we could have you all join, but you can be part of a committee. We did put in the chat a link to our committees, the descriptions. So if anybody's interested in them, please go to that link and then just contact me, Shelley, anybody on the board if you are interested in becoming part of the committee. I was going to show up the agenda, but we really don't have time. It's already 5 after 12, 12 after 5. But so we're going to have a great day tomorrow. We had a great day today. Thank you, everybody, and we will see you tomorrow morning, 8:30. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. And you'll find those election ballots in your email as well. So thanks again, everyone.
Dominica, are you still there?
Her face is.
I am.
How are we going to be doing the evaluation tomorrow? When I talk about it, do I just tell everybody they'll get an email, or will we be putting a link in the chat?
No, people will be getting an email after
Okay.
the conference.
Okay.
All those who attended the conference.
Okay. I just
And
wanted to know how to address it.
maybe we could
Anyone?
also pause the recording or stop it
Great.
all together.